Okay, we're going to get started. So I've received no regrets. Everybody's here, which is good news. Any declarations of interest? No, I see none. Excellent. Can we confirm the minutes of our meeting of 16 October 2017? Are those carried? Carried. Great. Thank you. So on communications, we have a response to Councillor Moffat's inquiry on the history and naming of Green Avenue. So thank you very much, Councillor Moffat, for for instigating that discussion. So moving to our substantive agenda, we have two main substantive items, both of which we have public delegation members signed up. So we'll carry through both of those in the order that they appear on the agenda. So our first item is an application for new construction at 667 Bank Street, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And members will recall that this application was before us at our June 9th, 2016 meeting and has subsequently been revised. And I'm going to start this item with by asking staff to provide us a bit of an update and a presentation on this item, and then we'll follow that with public delegations and then questions and comments to staff. So over to staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is in front of you today as an application for new construction in a Heritage Conservation District, the Clemo Heritage East Heritage Conservation District. The subject property is located on the corner of Bank Street and Clemo Avenue. It is currently a vacant lot. Since Bank Street was laid out, this has been a commercial lot. Initially it was a hotel, and then subsequently it was a service station, gas station. So and it's been vacant since 1992, but again, always served a commercial function. Here is the lot looking to the northeast, showing the City of Ottawa public art on the corner and the vacant lot with cars on it in the foreground. This is the view of the vacant lot from looking due north from Clemo. You see the boulevard the boulevard here that is associated with Clemo will be reinstated, but that comes later. Again, this is looking due east towards the heritage, the residential portion of the Heritage Conservation District. So again, it is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and all applications for new construction in Heritage Conservation District require the approval of Council. Here is the Heritage Conservation District. It is a Heritage Conservation District that is consists entirely of residential houses and is centered on Central Park, which is part of the Ottawa Improvement Commission parkway system, and Clemo Avenue was a driveway within that parkway system. The district was designated in 2011 for its cultural heritage value as a residential neighborhood centered on a park, and its heritage attributes include an eclectic mix of architectural styles, houses designed by W.E. Nofke, Central Park. Other of its attributes that are included in the Heritage Plan include the heritage street pattern and lot divisions, again, the rich architectural mix of styles, and Central Park, the attribute there is that it is the organizing feature around which the rest of the development was laid out, and then there are also attributes associated with the park, but the park is not affected by this application. The application is for a 5-story mixed-use building. The proposal also requires site plan approval and relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw, including an increased height to 16.7 meters where 15 meters is permitted, a reduced easterly side setback, and a reduced south setback to 0 where 3 meters is required. The rezoning application will be heard with this report, there's a typo, at the Planning Committee meeting of November 28th, and also the land use planner who is preparing that report is here to answer any questions that might arise. The recommendation is to approve the application for new construction in this Heritage Conservation District. This is a new landscape plan. There will be a motion associated with this, and I thought we'd start here so we could understand the organization of the site and then go into more detail. So this is the vacant lot. This is the exploration garden to its immediate north. This is the building's footprint. Here, when the application was previously in front of you, this was access to an underground parking garage. Now it's an attached bicycle and garbage shed, storage shed that is 1 story in height. And the landscape plan now includes, there's access here to the storage area, and then the reinstatement of grass towards Bank Street. This is a view towards the site along Clemo, and it will be, the landscaping that you see will be here, and the building will be here behind those trees. I'm now going to go through a series of before and afters because there have been quite a number of changes for the building, and so to help you understand the application that's in front of you today. So this is what was before you in June. This is what's before you now. So these are also, I couldn't get exact matches, so these do have the trees put in. In the north elevation, you can see to the left, there's a 2-story, there's 2 stories of apartments, and now these have been removed, and the top of the bicycle shed will be landscaped, and that is shown here. So this increases the buffer between the adjacent house and the building. Again, the 2 stories to the right of the picture have now been removed, and the attached bicycle shed is set back. And you can see there that the setback and the removal of those 2 buildings. So it's now a 12-unit building, and because of that, there's no parking required, which is why it was possible to remove the underground parking. Here is the east elevation, again with the 2 stories there. And also, you will note that there is a cutout to allow for the crown of the elm tree there. So this is, again, looking due east with the green roof of the on top of the bicycle shed. And here's some perspective. Again, I think this is the before. Here are those apartments that are now gone, and the building is the 5 stories rises here, and there's the attached bicycle shed. Again, from Clemo, and now from Clemo. Now these are, again, because there were the changes, and I'm showing a few more elevations than usual just to help understand the building in its setting as a new construction on a main street in a heritage conservation district. So there's a lot of things going on at once. So there is the west elevation, the north elevation. So this is looking south. You can see the adjacent house on the left. This is the east elevation. And so as is the case with all heritage conservation districts created since the new Heritage Act in 2005, there is a heritage conservation district plan associated with this particular application, and there's guidelines related to new buildings, and the guidelines are that they should contribute to and not detract from the character of the HCD and be designed to be compatible with the district's contributing buildings. In this particular instance, the use of brick, stone, cornices, and symmetrical window openings are compatible with the early 20th century character of the district. Further guidelines say that roof height and profile should be compatible with buildings in the streetscape. Below grade entrances are not permitted, and the ground floor should be compatible with the streetscape. This building faces Bank Street, so the height is compatible or is in keeping with the Main Street condition and will not negatively impact the heritage attributes of the HCD. The transition from 5 to 1 to the east mitigates the impact of the height on the district, and the roof of the proposed storage room will be planted to create a further buffer between the building, the traditional Main Street building, and the residential buildings within the Heritage Conservation District. Landscape guidelines are also included in the plan. They address houses are generally set back from the street by small unfenced front yards. This building is not a house, so the first guideline doesn't apply. Planting of trees is encouraged. The proposed development preserves the elm tree, and it's a tight lot, but is a new street tree proposed, and in addition, the landscaping on Clemo will provide a transition to the residential streetscape to the east, and the continuation of the green boulevard closer to Bank Street will provide a link between the traditional Main Street within the district and the residential portion of the district. There are also official plan policies that deal with intensification in areas that are Heritage Conservation District. The OP notes that a balance between the stated intensification goals of the OP and the goals of an HCD plan is required, and the scale, profile, and density of development permitted will vary when intensification target areas also correspond with HCDs. The OP also states that interpretation of plans and guidelines cannot be done without understanding that intensification is important to the long-term survival and vitality of heritage conservation districts, and that proposals for intensification should also take into consideration all the policies of the official plan. We also looked at the standards and guidelines, Parks Canada standards and guidelines from 2008 revised to 2012. The first standard is that an intervention in a heritage conservation district should conserve the heritage value of an historic place. This is consistent with that guideline. It will not have a negative impact on the defined heritage attributes of the HCD. The location on a corner and orientation to Bank Street will form an edge to the HCD. The visual impacts to the north and east will be mitigated by the stepping of the building, and the regreening of the boulevard will continue the landscape character of the Heritage Conservation District and the driveways within it to Bank Street. Standard 11 is conserve the heritage value and character when creating new additions to an historic place, so the materials and fenestration patterns conserve the heritage value and character, or reflect the heritage value and character of the existing place. There was also a heritage conservation, cultural heritage impact statement provided, which I won't read out, but the consultant who wrote that is here today. But it concluded that the commercial area along Bank Street, this intervention it does not have an impact on the residential component of the Heritage Conservation District. We did our usual consultation. Councillor Chernyshenko does not support the proposal. The Glebe Community Association does not support the proposal. Heritage Ottawa does not object to the proposal, so they support the proposal. In addition, neighbors within 60 meters of the property were notified, as were other Glebe residents who had attended a public meeting. So there was quite a large mail out regarding this, and comments have been received and distributed to the Built Heritage Subcommittee. In conclusion, 667 Bank Street is a unique property in the HCD as it is vacant and located on a traditional main street. The proposal meets the HCD guidelines for new buildings and the standards and guidelines, and the design and materials are sympathetic to the character of the HCD and will not negatively impact the heritage attributes, and for these reasons the department supports the application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. What we're going to do is we're going to move first to public delegations. We have 6 delegations signed up, and then we'll have an opportunity for members to ask questions and comments thereafter. I would note, just for those in the audience who are listening to the presentation, just to remind everybody that this is slightly complicated insofar as what's before the Built Heritage Subcommittee right now is an application for a heritage permit under the Ontario Heritage Act. As Ms. Coots indicated, there is a separate application for site plan approval and relief from provisions of the zoning bylaw, which will be heard by Planning Committee on November the 28th. So the question before the committee is, does the application abide by the Heritage Conservation District Plan and the requirements of the Ontario Heritage Act? So that's important, I think, just to frame this, because there are these two separate processes. So with that introduction, I'll turn now to public delegations. And again, we have 6 people signed up. Our first delegate is Ronald Weiss. If you can come up to the front, please. And just so that everyone who's speaking today understands, public delegations get 5 minutes, and I will be fairly strict in enforcing the 5 minutes because I feel it's important to be fair with regard to all delegations. So good morning and welcome to the Built Heritage Subcommittee.
Good morning. Thanks very much. First off, I'd like to make it clear that opposition to this proposal is not a case of not in my backyard. I believe that I speak for many residents of the community when I say that we look forward to the development of this property with a building that keeps within the historic and heritage nature of the neighborhood. Unfortunately, the current proposal does not. I own the property at 29 Clemo, that's the White House beside this building, abutting the lot of 667 Bank Street. This street is a special street in a special neighborhood. It was designated heritage for the simple reason that properties are one of a kind and of architecturally historic importance. When you decide on this application, you are setting a precedent. What happens on the remaining 3 corners of Bank and Clemo? Never in the history of the city, in the history of Clemo Avenue, has a building been built within 25 feet of Clemo Avenue. The Cultural Heritage Impact Statement concluded that the proposed development is appropriate to be built in this area. This document was prepared by a landscape architect whose views sharply differ from actual architects working in the field. I circulated a letter to all of you from Julian Smith, who is a renowned architect, a member of the Order of Canada. He undertook the restoration of the Vimy Memorial, among many other significant cultural and heritage projects. He is also a former resident of the Glebe. He is here today and will be speaking. He states, and I quote, "The guidelines for new construction in this Heritage Conservation District are very clear and unambiguous. There is no compelling evidence as to why they should be disregarded for the proposed project. If the district had been intended to be inward-looking, the boundary could easily have been drawn further east, so as not to include the Bank Street property. But this was not the decision. There are only 5 guidelines, and the key points are contained in the second guideline, which says that in order to be compatible, new buildings should respect the scale, height, and setback of the existing contributing buildings. The proposed building does none of these," end quote. You can also see these guidelines on page 7 of the staff report with comments only on the building materials to be used and does not actually address the discrepancy with all of the other new building requirements. Still on page 7 of the staff report, it states that there are no immediate neighbors which could be used to establish heights. My home, that White House, abuts this property and would be completely dwarfed by the proposed building and cast in shadow much of the day. This is what I find interesting in the whole process. More attention has been paid to the north-south impact. That is, when Sally Coots mentioned heights, she mentioned buildings along Bank Street. More attention has been paid to north-south than east-west. And I believe that the Heritage District guidelines apply very much to the east-west aspect of this proposal. Page 8 states, of the staff report states that the transition from 5 stories to 1 mitigates the height of this massive building. I'm not sure how this was determined, considering that it does not at all respect a 45-degree angle of transition. In addition to that, there's an elevator in this building. None of the drawings show an elevator pop-up, which will add another perhaps 10 feet to the roof. I also have a letter from Jerry Doyle, former president of the Ontario Association of Architects and current resident of the Glebe, and she states, and I quote, "The reason we as a community within the City of Ottawa have planning guidelines and zoning bylaws is to allow development to take place within a set of parameters that contribute to and enhance the city. To allow a development like this to proceed, which ignores the existing guidelines, is difficult to understand, and one wonders why we have guidelines if the city should choose to ignore them, especially in such a prime location as this site." I have the copies of this letter to distribute if you like. Lastly, I have a letter from the architect and Glebe resident Paul Dolan, who states, among other things, "With the height increase and the rear yard setback elimination, the volume of the building has been maximized. The only noticeable exception is at the northeast corner where the heights have been reduced due to the Central Park tree. The building outline pushes right out to the arc of the canopy. Why is there more deference to a tree than to a neighborhood?" The owner of this property at 667 Bank Street purchased the lot in 1992 for the sum of
Dr. Weiss,
$225.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. You have about 10 or 15 seconds.
Okay. He understood that this was a small lot and that there would be difficulties in developing it. And like Cinderella's glass slipper, the applicant is attempting to squeeze a giant foot into a tiny shoe, and it does not fit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your statement. Are there any questions to Dr. Weiss? No? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming this morning. Next speaker on the list is Wolf Illing.
Mr. Speaker,
Yeah, if you have something to circulate, the staff can take that from you. Great. So good morning and welcome, and you have 5 minutes to speak.
yes, thank you. My name is Wolf Illing. I live on Clermont Avenue on the west side, the first house on the southwest corner. And I reflect the views of all the neighbors in that area who did not come here to make a presentation. But there are the planning angle and the heritage angle. I'm only going to address the heritage angle today. The planning angle, as it was pointed out, is going to be dealt with at another meeting in a couple of weeks by another committee. So when it comes to the heritage aspect, there are two ways to look at that violation. One is the general layout of Clermont Avenue, which was originally conceived by the first developer, Henrietta Adelaide Clermont, who set up what she called a covenant, which, amongst other things, required a 25-foot setback from the street of any property that is being erected on Clermont Avenue, which was later on, by the way, applied also to Monkland and Linden Terrace. The east side from Bank or Clermont and other areas have been declared conservation district already by the city. The rest of Clermont, Monkland, and Linden Terrace are in the process of being approved by the city or declared by the city as heritage conservation districts, okay? That is going to happen within the next several months. There has to be a public hearing first, later on this year or early next year, and then City Council will vote on it. That involves the maintenance of the 25-foot setback on all those avenues, which are, by the way, a very attractive asset, not only to the neighborhood, but to the whole city. This property that's being proposed here violates this heritage tradition. It protrudes by at least 15 to 20 feet on closer to Clemo than it is supposed to, be if the precedents for all the other properties have been followed. There's no other property that, since 1903, that has ever been built that violates that setback. So why should this single building obscure and destroy this great vision that was set up and had been abided by everyone for all those years? So, we think that that application on that ground alone should be denied, and the developer should be asked to obey what is sort of a historical standard for that area. Then specifically, that property is part of the Clemo East Heritage Conservation District that the city had approved, and embedded in that approval are requirements that the building obey height, scale, and setback, including the 25-foot setback, and it does not do this. So there's the second violation here. And again, we think that your committee should, ask the developer to obey that requirement. I would be happy to ask by the way, the map I distributed here to you shows how that property protrudes on the, violates that heritage setback requirement. Okay, can you see that on the little map that I gave you? Okay, so if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much for your statement. Are there any questions for Mr. Illing? I see none, so thank you very much for coming out, and thank you for distributing the map as well. So next on our list is Jamie Posen and Brian Casagrande. And they'll be followed by Vincent Golitza, and then John Stewart, and then Doug Casey. Good morning and welcome.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of subcommittee. My name is Jamie Posen. I'm a planner with Foten Consultants, and with me as well is Brian Casagrande, director with Foten. Most of the points that we're going to make today have been alluded to in Ms. Coote's presentation, but we'll just sort of sum up from our perspective. The site, of course, is designated Traditional Main Street in the official plan. The designation, of course, is a proper designation and not an overlay as explicitly stated in the plan. And this really represents, as was alluded to, a transition point between this traditional Main Street character along Bank Street with the considerations for the Heritage Conservation District. And so for us, it's all about balancing those two realities. The traditional Main Street envisions 4 to 6 stories. The proposal in front of the committee is, of course, 5 stories. Also envisions an active frontage along Bank Street, which specifies retail grade in particular, which is proposed in the proposal. Transitioning to the neighborhood adjacent and framing the street, and particularly at corner lots framing that corner. So this really is an opportunity to achieve the goals of the OP while still balancing with the heritage objectives. Some of the comments that have been made in the previous speakers have somewhat discounted the reality of Bank Street, that Bank Street does exist. It crosses Clemo at this location. It's a traditional main street. It's a very important street to the city of Ottawa and to the glebe. And this is the big question for us is what is the most appropriate way to acknowledge both of these realities and balance both of those considerations. And so the way that the building is proposed does achieve a lot of those objectives in our opinion. It activates the street on the lot, which has not really been activated in quite some time and really represents an area that has not been activated in quite some time, although it has been receiving some attention lately. And the actual details of the proposal, as has been outlined, represents a sensitive design on a relatively challenging site. It does accommodate the overhanging tree in the adjacent exploration garden. It transitions in massing and setback, and the setback of the piece in between the main part of the building towards the east has actually been increased, front yard setback and side yard setback, over the course of the project towards 29 Clemmo. And it's, of course, cognizant of any overlook potential to the adjacent neighbor by proposing no balconies, few windows, most of which are faux windows, and of landscaping features as well to achieve that transition.
Members of the committee, I would just like to also just add to Jamie, FOTEN was brought in on this file sort of halfway into the process. The application had been to Heritage Committee. Mr. Kalitsa engaged ourselves and basically asked us, what do you think about the project? So I had some initial questions, how are you protecting the tree, the elm tree you've heard a lot about? And Mr. Kalitsa explained to me his initiatives there, and I was quite happy and comfortable with that. And then it was, how are you transitioning to the neighbor to the east? And he showed me how the previous project had I think it was a 3-story element there, and it was closer, it was right on the property line. And my encouragement to Mr. Kalitsa was that let's see if we can drop that down to a 1-story element so that it functions and feels almost like an accessory structure that would be for bike parking, for garbage, whatever it may be. And let's design that facade in a way that mitigates against any overlook issues, and so he has responded by eliminating any opportunity for balconies. The windows have been reduced, if not eliminated, and basically have a 1-story element that has landscaping on it. The third thing was, is it stepping back? Is it transitioning to Clemau? And as you can see, as you move along towards Clemau, the building basically steps in rather dramatically so that you transition from the single-family home to the main facade of this building. And the last interest on my behalf is, what are we doing for Bank Street? Are we animating it sufficiently? So I was pleased to hear that small, discrete retail is being proposed. You don't see a lot of that being built on Bank Street nowadays. And in addition, we worked very hard to see if there would be an opportunity to create small patio spaces along that facade. So now you basically have a situation where you're turning what is, in my view, a void and wanting strip of the glebe or portion of the glebe into something that's now going to be complemented and animated in a very sensitive way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question, if no other members do, which is, could you just speak briefly to the history and the current status of the 25-foot setback?
Councillor, so my understanding, we basically deferred to city staff on that. It has, historic legal considerations, if you will, which they vetted rather thoroughly, understand with their legal staff, and the conclusion was that it doesn't have any status or relevance anymore from a legal perspective. What Jamie referred to in his presentation, which I was sort of, asking him to speak to, is the fact that from what I'm hearing, the residents of Clemmo want to envision this as if it's an interior lot on their street. But the reality is you have a real edge condition here that's created by the introduction, well, it's always been there, of Bank Street. And so the real challenge here is, how do you properly treat and frame Bank Street, and then at the same time transition to what I think is what the intended area of the heritage considerations are, which is as you move along Clemmo. I think the reason the designation would have extended to Bank Street is so that applications can be designed with sufficient consideration and sensitivity to that transition, not so that they can actually function exactly like the remainder of Clemmo.
Okay, thank you. Question from Councillor Wilkinson.
You mentioned something about a possible future patio. Where would you put it? It's not a lot of space left there.
Yes, Councillor. So when I say patio, I don't want to leave the impression of something significant. This is like a coffee shop, three table type scenario where it's really meant to be very discreet and quiet and providing an opportunity for some, if it is a restaurant space, for it to be a little bit more as it contributes to the street, but in no way to be a concern for nuisance issues.
Where would it be, though, on which side?
Oh, sorry. So if you see on that facade along Bank Street where
Yeah.
Sally's pointing, that's a raised terrace that you have a ramp and steps going up to. And so, like I said, there's really only opportunity for tables of maybe 2 to be set along there in the event that the use
And that wouldn't
dictated.
block the sidewalk?
No, because the sidewalk is south of,
Okay.
west of that. You can see that right there.
Okay, thank you, that's all I wondered about.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you very much
Thank you.
for coming this morning. So our next speaker is Vincent Kalitsa, and again, followed by John Stewart. Good morning. Over to you.
Over the past 3 years, we've worked closely with the Planning Department and Heritage Design Review Panel, because we've been in front of them twice, and addressed some of the public concerns in an effort to establish a compatible and sustainable form of development. We've incorporated a series of adjustments to the massing and form to address the hydro setback, which is a major imposition on this property. There's a 5-meter hydro clearance along Bank Street because of the high voltage lines, which position the front of the building along Bank Street another 2.5 or 2.8 meters into the site. Clearances for the American elm tree, we did a series of boreholes, tested, checked to see if there's any root structure within the property. There isn't. We've had an arborist obviously involved in that. We've actually surveyed the tree. We looked at the overhang. We cut the building back to respect the overhang of the tree and to offer more sunlight. We've lowered the height of the building from our previous application overall, so it's about 1.7 meters beyond the 15 meters. This property sits about half a meter below the property to the east, so the actual impact of the additional height is about 1.2 meters, slightly under 4 feet. And we've looked at the transition element. We've also looked at what is the importance of maintaining the frontage along Bank Street. As chairman of the Urban Design Review Panel in Hamilton, we have been working closely with developers to maintain a consistent facade along traditional main streets. In this case, we felt it was important, given the width of the right-of-way. Clemau has a 26-meter right-of-way, so from the face of the building at the property line on Clemau to the south side of Clemau, it's approximately 26 meters. Bank Street, on the other hand, is only 20 meters. So the right-of-way along Clemau is quite large to begin with. That's why you see the large boulevard, the side yard, if you will, along Clemau, which is quite large and can accommodate additional landscaping, can accommodate the public art as you see it now. And we've located a small entrance to the residential lobby to the side of the building. Yes, the site is shallow. Yes, the site is limited by its width as well. But when you take into account the hydro setback, the clearances for the tree, and the transition element at the rear, The plate only accommodates 3 small 550 to 650 square foot apartments on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th floor. The ground floor is retail. The reason the building is somewhat over the height limit is driven strictly by the notion of providing about 4.5 meters of clearance on the ground floor for the retail uses, which is about 15 feet. Traditional retails are in the neighborhood of 20 feet for national franchises for commercial retail. So we won't be able to attract any of those users. We'll likely attract more mom and pop sort of small operations. Ground floor is only 1,900 square feet of retail. It's not a large retail component, but that's what the site happens to yield with the lobby and so on for the apartment building. So in terms of the building design itself, we followed traditional urban infill design guidelines for residential. Ottawa is about 42 guidelines. We meet 41 of the 42. The 42nd one dealt with parking, which we do not have. The building addresses large openings for the ground floor, traditional use of stone elements, a banding element, a cadence of windows that basically forms the body of the building, capped by a cornice at the top of the 4th floor. The upper floor is treated with a tile or a metallic material. In Boston, I've looked at many cities, in London last weekend, to see what type of uses they use on their top floors. And it's pretty consistent with what I've seen elsewhere around the world. The park is animated with windows. Originally, when we first brought our application in, we had basically had an inverted building. We looked at Bank Street, we looked to the south, we limited all the windows to the east, with the exception of one bedroom on the 2nd floor, because it's a 2-bedroom unit. Because of the step, they became all 1-bedrooms. So the windows, there are no windows facing the east. The stairwells have full windows to animate the elevation as you come down Clement heading west. And the park, as I say, has windows now that are animated to animate the facade.
I'm going to have to ask you to stop or to wrap up.
That's fine. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Kalitsa? I see none, so thank you very much for coming this morning and speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So, Mr. Stewart, you're well placed to go right into your 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Commonwealth undertook the CHIS for this development, and the conclusion that we arrived at was that the development proposal is appropriate for its location on Bank Street and is part of the Heritage Conservation District, bordering on Clement Estate East Heritage Conservation District. When you look at the site, it's a rather unique property, and you follow the history of the site. It was originally surveyed, and the lot was developed along with the survey for the Clement Estates. At the time the survey was carried out, there was a building on the site. It was a hotel, and hotel faced onto Bank Street. Following the 1912, I believe, the hotel was demolished, and a garage was built in that location. Again, it faced onto Bank Street, and again, the site did not follow the traditional setbacks associated with the Clement Avenue. The entire site was occupied by garage, and it was in fact an edge treatment with Clement Avenue and the buildings. There was traditionally, that building was almost exactly the same location as this particular, very close to the lot line, with activities associated with the garage and facing the site. So in that sense, the idea of the boulevard traditionally at the corner. it didn't carry forward. In terms of the design and the development, uses the vocabulary of the traditional Bank Street and blends with the design vocabulary of the Heritage Conservation District. The overall style and the materials of the building are consistent with and complement the character of the Heritage District and the commercial facades. The development will have an overall positive effect on the area and is an important improvement from the current use as a parking lot. The mixed-use commercial and residential building will help connect the Bank Street streetscape to the north and the south. The location of the development also provides an opportunity to establish a buffer to the Clement Estates Heritage Conservation District from Bank Street and the commercial activity. Ultimately, the property and the proposed development is a featured building and a prominent relationship to Bank Street and to the Heritage Conservation District. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that statement. Are there any questions for Mr. Stewart? I see none, so thank you for coming up. So next we have Doug Casey, followed by Julian Smith.
Hi, my name's Doug Casey. I live at 18 Clement in the same block that the proposal is in. I also own a company called Charles Fort Developments. We do infill housing and high-rise stuff. And anyway, with development, we try to do things that we find compatible and tie into the neighborhood. And part of that process is dealing with the restraints that you have on a site. There was a comment about the tree. There was a comment about hydro lines. Like, we've moved hydro lines to get clearances so that we can keep buildings where we want to. And trees, like we did a project in Ottawa South where there was a big oak, and we developed around it and, you know, did it as a feature. So, I mean, with development, you have restraints and you have challenges. So I think, you know, the idea of pushing the building closer to the neighbor on Glebe is not, those aren't good arguments for it. John Leaning was an architect in Ottawa and a resident. He was with the NC. And he wanted to get this heritage district established because he was concerned that 85 Glebe was going to be torn down. It's right on Patterson Creek, and it's a beautiful old house. And it's a really neat district. Like Nofke, this architect from 1903, worked with Miss Clemo, and they had this setback on the street was you have an 11-foot grass boulevard to the road, and then the sidewalk is set back from that. And then to make more of a sort of a green pastoral feeling, they had all of the houses set back 25 feet. Now, that setback extends from O'Connor, which is to the east, all the way through to Bronson. And the idea was that all of Clemo was to feel like a nice, big, open street. Everything on Clemo is set back. Historically, all the buildings, including the 4 corners of Bank and Clemo, were all set back 25 feet, and that is a very important part of the Heritage District, and it's a very important part of the whole, well, the whole atmosphere of what you're creating. The Heritage Department did finally get a designation for the area that we're looking at, and my understanding is that the rest of Clemo, Linden, and Monkland, which are similar streets where they have the sidewalk, you know, set back and big front lawns, that's supposed to have been put through this year, and it hasn't happened. I don't know what the priorities are, but like it's part of a bigger vision here. And I think if we want to respect our heritage, we have to do it properly. Clemo is a really nice street, and part of it, whether the covenant is still binding or not, this 25-foot setback, the reason for the Heritage District designation is partly because the houses were set back so far and you had this big open space. It's that setback that establishes the importance. In terms of compatibility, to say a 5-story building right next door to a 2-story building is compatible, that's a stretch. And you can say you've got a 1-story transition. If you look at the heritage, or sorry, the traditional Main Street zoning, it says that the backyard, which would be the yard abutting the neighbor, should be 25 feet. They've built, or they're proposing to build very, very close to it. The building, it projects way out to, it's got a zero front lot line on Clemo. It will totally block off the heritage district, and I think it's bad. Like, anyway. I just hope you consider heritage and you value it, and that you make the right decision. Questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't see any questions. Member Quinn.
Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is really in response to your comment about the idea of the boulevard running all the way from O'Connor through to Bronson. But yet, on the west side of Bank Street, there's actually quite a bit of landscaping and signage that is blocking the messages, really kind of that you don't come in. The street is narrowed for traffic calming, I'm presuming. So I'm just wondering how do you...
Well, the buildings...
and it effectively narrows your access into Clemo structurally.
I honestly think traffic engineers, when I look at what's happened on Main Street and some of the other roads, I really question the logic. So I don't want to comment about that. The idea of, I think the idea is trying to make the pedestrian crossing safer, because by narrowing the road surface, people are safe out on the sidewalks. The buildings, though, and the massing, when you stand back and you look, the buildings are back 25 feet. So you've got this open space. I agree with you that the road's been narrowed. I can't comment on why that has occurred.
Right. I would say it's a consideration if this idea of a heritage conservation district is in fact going to grow westward.
Well, apparently it's been on the books for several years. There's been meetings with neighbors. Linden and Monkland are also slated to be designated for the same reason, and I think it's because it's reflecting or looking at what's nice and saying let's make sure we maintain it. And the idea of maintaining it is when you're walking down the street, that it's not closed in, you can't see down the street. Like, if you remember the Greek, I think it's the Greek embassy residence at it's next to 520, the driveway. You drive up the driveway near Lansdowne Park, and this Greek, it's a magnificent building. Well, what happened with the zoning is the front yard setback was changed, and so there were a bunch of townhouses built that completely block off this majestic looking building. It's a huge loss for the city in terms of view. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for coming this morning. And so the final speaker on my list is Jane Smith. Good morning and welcome to the subcommittee.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. I had no idea this was on the agenda. I'm here for 551 Fairview. There's a similar issue, so I think it's important to address it. A Heritage Conservation District exists under the Heritage Act. The Heritage Act and the Planning Act are polar opposites. The Planning Act is based on a utopian future for any community, and then you get zoning bylaws and all the regulations to move towards that future, which is outlined in the official plan. And you can only do that when you have a certain level of standardization and regulation and conformity, and what happens is you get quantitative rules that are applied. And then you have a whole network. I don't know how many planners are employed by the City of Ottawa to deal with bylaw variances. It's a whole system. It's based on this moving towards some agreed on future. The Heritage Act is not based on the future. It's based on the current situation, what exists, and how you can preserve the value of what exists. And that is a community-based decision on what the characteristics are that define the community. The Planning Act is expert-driven, and the final authority on the Planning Act is the OMB. The Heritage Act is community-driven. That's how it was created. That's why LACACs were created, which are now these advisory committees to council. And the Heritage Act, its only mandate is to protect the cultural distinctiveness of places, not the uniformity of places. It exists only to protect what is unusual, rare, special in our cities. Clemo Avenue was designed by the Ottawa Improvement Commission. It was the original to the Central Experimental Farm from Parliament Hill. You were going to come down the Queen Elizabeth driveway, turn, and go across Clemo. It changed later as Lansdowne Park was developed. But that's why it has NCC streetlights along it, which are very rare for an urban street, and it was a wide boulevard. The Heritage Conservation District, I don't know how much clearer you can be in a Heritage Conservation District to define what that means and why the setbacks are important. Bank Street is going to survive as a commercial artery whether there's 25 feet less on that building. I mean, there's no question. Bank Street has its own identity and its own life. The other issue I just want to raise is the planning department can do whatever it wants with FOTAN and others to say, here are the rules and here are how we're going to apply them. The Heritage Planning Unit at the City of Ottawa, their responsibility is to the community. If they don't support what the community's vision is on one of these applications for a Heritage Conservation District, they have to recuse themselves. They are no longer part of that debate because you can't have the Heritage Planning Unit taking the role of the planners and saying we're going to adopt the top expert-driven approach of the Planning Act and apply it to Heritage Conservation Districts. Otherwise, there's no reason to have Heritage Conservation Districts. You might as well just say, we're going to apply a different type of zoning to Clemo, and then it'll go through all the normal variances, which is exactly what's happening here. So I'm very concerned if this application is being dealt with as simply a zoning issue and setbacks, when it's very clear that the character of Clemo as defined in the Heritage Conservation District is being absolutely undermined. I mean, there's no way that a symmetrical 5-story modernist building is equivalent to Nufke's asymmetrical natural materials, very picturesque approach with the gabled roofs and so on. There's just, you can't make that connection. I don't know if you have any questions, but I just thought I should speak to that issue.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that intervention. I'm looking to see if there are any questions. I don't see any, but thank you for speaking to that item. So that concludes the public delegation portion. Now we're open to questions to staff. Again, I'll let the Vice Chair go first. I also have one, so Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. A question to both planning staff and heritage staff. Julian Smith's point highlights something that we've all been aware of, and that is that there's often city policies that appear to be in conflict with each other, one under the Planning Act and one under the Heritage Act. And when the Clemo Estates Heritage Conservation District was approved in 2011, at that time it was quite evident that the district intersected with the traditional Main Street. And in looking at the Heritage Conservation District guidelines for the Clemo Estate area, there was no recognition that something transitional would be occurring at this intersection, which was attempting to satisfy two masters, a traditional Main Street and a residential Heritage Conservation District. So was this an oversight that there was no special guideline for this corner? And in the plans for the future Heritage Conservation District that will be heading west, but also intersecting with Bank Street, will there be a change in the approach for these transitional blocks? So that's a question for planning and for heritage.
In terms of the future district that will run west from Bay Street, certainly it's in the again it's the study is underway, and certainly if the study reveals that the district should go to Bank Street, then there would be guidelines regarding the properties on Bank Street. We're not there yet, but certainly we're going to note that very carefully. And then your question about whether or not this one lot adjacent to Central Park, whether it was an oversight. I suppose the answer is there could have been guidelines related to it, but the guidelines that are in the district, the 5 guidelines for infill development, are adequate we consider them adequate in analyzing this particular intervention and its character, etc.
A second question, if that's the case in 2011, why was there no effort to modify the zoning from the planning perspective of this property on Bank Street in order to reflect those? Because what has happened is that we've set up these two policies that are headlong facing each other. And that's the dilemma that this committee has to face. And there is a second question for planning, and that is there the need for a rezoning or committee of adjustment application on this proposal?
I think you've got like three questions there. The first question is, after the completion of the Heritage Conservation District, why was there no rezoning? And the answer there is that for many years we did heritage overlay zoning after a district was created. We didn't do that in this particular instance because we concluded it wasn't necessary, and there's no perceived need from the traditional Main Street zoning on Bank Street adequately addresses this site, so there's no need to rezone this site after the completion of the Heritage Conservation District.
I would just echo Sally's comments. I think if there was an identified need at that time, that there was an issue on this particular site, we would have received direction or got some direction to do that. Clearly there wasn't, and so the current traditional Main Street zoning that was in effect then is still in effect now.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on, I had read in the materials slightly conflicting histories of that 25-foot setback. I'm wondering if staff can just, again, quickly encapsulate what the history and current status of that setback is.
I will also defer to legal, but as was the case with Island Park Drive, for example, many of the, prior to a elaborate land use planning system, covenants were used also in other parts of the glebe to regulate the location, et cetera, of properties. So along the driveways, there were, again, mandated large covenants. There were also, materials were addressed. It was just a simple primitive zoning tool, and it was enacted through covenant. It is our understanding, and legal can clarify, that covenant certainly, I mean, it is no longer in force, and so what we have now is the existing zoning, which along Clemo is Allison can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel the residential part of Clemo, the front yard setback is 3 meters, and the covenant was for 25 feet. The covenant is no longer in place. But again, I'll ask Ms. Enta to clarify further on the covenant.
Mr. Chair, the restrictive covenant that's been spoken to was, I guess, created in 1903 between Henrietta Clemo and the Ottawa Improvement Commission, and spoke to a Margaret Clemo as the third party to that restrictive covenant. A restrictive covenant typically has a fixed expiration date. It's the recommendation that all restrictive covenants will have one. And these are governed under the Land Titles Act. And the Land Titles Act under Section 119 deems any restrictive covenant that is not time limited to expire after 40 years. So it's deemed to have expired after 40 years. We're well past that, Mr. Chair. In this particular case, the section speaks to where it's deemed to have expired 40 years after the condition was registered. The register may delete it. The land registrar may delete it from title. And I can tell you that the covenant has been removed from the register relating to the parcel identifiers for both 667 Bank Street and the road allowance, which is now owned by the City of Ottawa. So if it was ever registered, it has now been deleted, and the inference could be, based on this section, that it was deemed to have expired by the registrar and was deleted under this section of the Act.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any comments from members before we wrap up? Councillor Chernyshenko.
Thank you very much. Naturally, as the ward councillor, I'm being very involved in this project from the beginning, and I have to say that there are many things about the project which are precisely what we would like to see along Bank Street. This is from its from the high quality of architecture that's being proposed to the engagement with the traditional Main Street, the kind of thing that we do envisage here. I'm trying, though, today to disassociate those things which might be purely planning committee city decisions as opposed to heritage. That's rather hard to do because you can't entirely extricate them, but I will try to. You will note that I am not in support of this project, and that really came down to several things in the end. And so taking it from the heritage perspective, in some ways, I guess I have to include, I'm agnostic on the setback from Clemo Avenue with the legal interpretation that I hear, which is that it's no longer a requirement, seems to be the predominant legal view. But that doesn't take away from the fact that to have this perceived encroachment now onto Clemo Avenue, it would create quite a significant change to that vista, to that very wide avenue. And should this one be allowed, we really have to assume that it will then happen on all three of the other corners. So I think although not purely a decision on all four corners by any means, we have to take that in recognition that we're going to see those other three one-story buildings, limited architectural value with a lot of parking, move forward into the Clemo street width over the next number of years. There's actually a lot of interest and activity on some of those properties at the moment. But fundamentally, two areas are of great concern to me. One, the adjacent property. We heard from Mr. Weiss today. The fact that the additional story and the reduced setback ends up creating a far from the 45-degree angle, which would be typical for here. I cannot conclude that this project upholds the history, the heritage, the character of this street as a result of that additional story. And in a similar way for the park, very brief history of the park is that this was something that over a number of years the community, very much a community-driven effort to create a space that was particularly attractive to children, attractive to their caregivers and parents moving down that street. And a lot of attention went into design. It is small. It is surrounded by green space on the one side, but it's very important to that space that light find its way in. And for most of the day, most of the year, very little light, even with the cutout that is being created for the upper stories of this tree, will light find its way into this garden. And that would be a tremendous loss to something that the community put a lot of value in, and a fair bit of cash in lieu of parkland money was spent to create this. To some degree, we would be undermining that very recent investment. But finally, since there is an important heritage element to the landscaping, to the tree itself, that American elm is extraordinarily rare and is a remarkable tree in good health at the moment. The contention is from the proponent that this tree would not be threatened. And I would not begin to call into doubt the professional judgment of their arborists, but their that the city knows, which runs counter to that. When constructing this park and putting up the quite low fence around it, work was done, some excavation was done, and the contractors with city park staff encountered the roots that do find their way under and between the two walls, which have been deemed to be the reason why important roots could not have penetrated through and into what is now the parking lot, which would be the building site, was that those walls would have stopped it. No, there's a gap between two of those walls, and in fact roots were encountered, quite significant roots were encountered. So that they may not have been encountered when borehole tests. You don't do a borehole test in every centimeter along, and they may not have been encountered, but that's an important fact. And then finally, to what degree this is relevant to heritage, I guess is your judgment, is the constructability of this building. Because city park staff and I are and will be adamant that the park not be used as a staging site for construction, we have to ask the question, is this building constructible as planned without depending on the city park and the damage that to the park, should they have been allowed to construct from there. So, as I say, I'm not sure how relevant that is to heritage, other than as a package, protecting that park being critical, it calls into question the constructability. For those reasons, I am still not able to support this project.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments? Member Smollett?
Thank you. I gather, it sounds from your comments like you really couldn't build any building on that site. If the roots are coming from one end and there's a 25-foot, ideally a 25-foot setback from the other end, and the issue is the lighting, does that mean really you view that site as undevelopable for any building at all?
No, I think just some additional setback adjacent to the park would make a difference. The constructability element is, although oddly, because the address of this building is on Bank Street, this is deemed to be a side yard. Therefore, it is as of right to have no setback adjacent to the park. Claiming that right and taking full advantage of it, it limits constructability. There may be techniques where it can be done entirely from above, but that certainly leads me to ask that question. I don't want it to be an assumption this building could be constructed making use of the park. So I think our own staff's initial request or thought was, well, instead of taking cash in lieu of parkland, why don't we take parkland and claim several meters at park or protection for the park, and then allow a building to be built with greater protection for the park.
Okay. If no other comments from members, I'll just offer a few quick concluding comments. And then we will move to the next item. But actually, we have a couple of votes first before we do that. I mean, there's no question this is a complex case in two ways, both because there are heritage elements and there are planning elements, and it's often difficult to keep those distinct and separate. So I accept that. And for example, I have some sympathy and understanding planning point of view, which I will raise on November 29th, about the question of heights and angles and how we step back a fifth story on a traditional Main Street, but that's not a question for this morning. I think a second tension is this question between how we marry, in some ways, a traditional Main Street, which, as has been stated, and no one disagrees, is a very important Main Street in our city, and the fact that, as these streets often do, they abut residential streets. In this case, we've got a heritage conservation district. So I think what I am seized with is whether or not the application satisfies the 5 requirements in Section 721 of the relevant Heritage Conservation District Plan. And in some ways, you have to interpret those 5 as an address on Bank Street, which it is. And so what is the consideration of how this proposed building looks first and foremost in relation to its Bank Street facade and its Bank Street treatment, and the fact that this is a traditional Main Street with a very rich history, I guess a checkered history, both a commercial building and a parking lot. But this has not been a stale lot for the history of the city, and I think that's an important point as well. And so again, recognizing those two tensions and recognizing that we always have to be cognizant of the relationship between a traditional Main Street residential neighbors, and knowing, as we do from our work 18 months ago, that this application has undergone many changes, and in my mind has been sensitive to some of the issues which we heard from residents when this came before us 18 months ago. I'm in a position to support the staff recommendation. I think it's a sensitive application that tries to thread the needle carefully through those various tension points. So I'll just offer that as my remarks. Before we get to the recommendation of staff, the Vice Chair does have a technical motion with regard to including the landscape plan. So if you can just read that out, Mr. Vice Chair, that would be helpful.
Like Jan Harder here, where's my paper? Whereas the applicant has submitted a revised landscape plan prepared by Levesque Consulting Inc., dated November 8th, with respect to the proposed new construction. Therefore, be it resolved that document 6 of the report be replaced with the attached revised landscape plan prepared by the landscape architect, submitted by the applicant and dated November 8th. And be it further resolved that recommendation number 1 is amended accordingly by the deletion of document 4, 5, 6, and 7, and substituting the words documents 4, 5, and 7, and that the revised landscape plans be attached as document 6.
Okay, is that motion carried? Carried. Okay, and then with having carried that motion, then we'll move to the staff recommendation to approve the application for new construction at 667 Bank Street, according to the plan submitted by Vincent Kalitza, architect, on July 6, 2017, etc. Is that carried?
I'd like to speak, if I could.
Okay. So,
just if I might speak to the motion.
Okay, go ahead.
And that is, I support the motion, but recommend that what I would consider the oversight in 2011 of not amending the zoning on the site or harmonizing the objectives of the Planning Act and the Heritage Act be really looked at very carefully in the next phases of the Heritage Conservation District, so that the other 3 corners don't suffer the same kind of conflict that we see here.
Okay, thank you for that statement. So the recommendation is carried. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to the members of the public who came this morning. Thank you, Councillor Chernyshenko, for your participation. So we'll move now to our next item. Maybe I'll just give those who want to leave an opportunity to leave before we start. Yeah. Yeah, she's working. I've got a few changes that I'm working on. Okay, good. Just little things to get a little bit more legalese. So I'm gonna pass these over to her, and
okay.
Yeah.
So
This is your language. Okay, we're going to get right back at it. Those who don't want to be here for this item are welcome to leave. But we're going to move now to the application to alter 551 Fairview Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. So we are going to start with a staff presentation and then move again, same format, to public delegations and then an opportunity for questions and comments from members. So with that introduction, over to staff, please, for the presentation.
Good morning. The application that we're looking at today is an application to alter 551 Fairview Avenue. It's a property located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District and designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Myself and David Maloney will be splitting the presentation today, so David will start it off.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. The property at 551 Fairview Avenue is located to the north of Fairview Avenue, south of Old Prospect Road. It was constructed in 1927 and designed by A.J. Hazelgrove in the Tudor Revival style. It is a 2.5-story building, rectangular in plan with a steeply pitch-tipped roof. The rear of the lot is visible from the pathway beside McKay Lake, known as the Dog Walk. The property has been for sale since May 2016 and has been vacant since November 2016. The house is set back significantly from Fairview Avenue, with only the cobblestone driveway visible from the street. The driveway leads to the impressive front facade of the house, the photo on the right. Before you is the proposed site plan. So with my cursor, I'll orient the members of the committee. So the lake is here, Mackay Lake is there, the dog walk is approximately here. The proposed rear addition is outlined here. The outline of the existing enclosed veranda is here. And you can see that the existing driveway was here, and that will be relocated to this side of the house. And the new Japanese garden is proposed where the existing driveway and the garage is currently. Existing terraced landscape is located here, and the stacked stone retaining walls, and these are to be conserved as part of this proposal. The proposal is to construct a contemporary 2-story addition with a walkout basement to the rear of the existing grade 1 house. The proposal also involves the relocation of the driveway, as mentioned, to the south side of the property, which will follow the natural slope on this lot. The driveway will be slightly sunk in below existing grade and flanked by a stacked stone retaining wall. The design of the proposed driveway is intended to minimize the visual impacts of vehicles on neighboring properties. This is the front elevation of the house. The front facade will not be altered as part of this proposal, and the addition is not visible from the front of the house. This is the east elevation showing the proposed addition. The new addition is located below the steeply pitched tipped roof of the historic building and set in from the north and south sides of the house. The form of the addition is characterized by stacked massing. The ground floor addition extends the furthest east towards Mackay Lake, with the first and second stories further stepped back toward the original building. The intent of the tiered development is to break up the overall massing of the addition as viewed from the dog walk and to reflect the terraced landscaping characteristics of the lot, as well as the considerable upward slope of the property from the lake. The height of the addition is about a ½ meter lower than the height of the enclosed veranda, so I'm talking about the first floor addition, and extends approximately 8.5 meters further toward the lake. Here's the south elevation, which shows the side of the original house and the proposed addition, including the new garage, to be located here. The ground floor of the addition is clad in stone, wood, and glass. The first and second stories are primarily clad in wood and glass. Here's the north elevation. The wood will be heat-treated ash and used as both picket screening and siding. The proposal includes a cobblestone terrace at grade and a balcony on the first floor. The insert at the top of the screen indicates the location of the proposed addition and the original house in relationship to the dog walk here. An outline of the neighboring house is also indicated, just here. This cross-section shows a limited change of grade at the top terrace wall, that's there, in order to accommodate the addition. The proposed addition will increase the lot coverage to approximately 12.7%, whereas the zoning bylaw permits 30%, and the floor space index increases to 0.22, whereas the zoning bylaw permits 0.375. These are renderings of the existing house with the proposed addition as viewed from the southwest and northwest corners of the front facade. These are renderings of the additions as viewed from the northeast and southeast corners of the front facade. You will notice in the top image the location of the existing retaining wall, which will be conserved as part of this proposal. The addition is to be constructed of natural materials, including smooth square-cut Indiana limestone, heat-treated ash, and bronze trim at various fascias and separations. Thin rail and style type glazing is proposed for openings of the new addition. The addition will require the removal of a portion of the rear facade, including the enclosed veranda, the exterior wall behind the veranda, a ground floor window, and two second-story windows with arches that break the eaves. The enclosed veranda was constructed in 2010 on top of the original walkout terrace. The proposed alterations include the proposal the proposed alterations include restoration of existing heritage building and its rear facade, and the landscape attributes as required. So what I'm trying to say is that there will be restoration of the house and landscape elements as required. The project will preserve and repair windows, chimney, stucco, and half timbering. Also, the applicant indicated an intent to repair and restore the existing cedar roof. Finally, the stacked stone walls of the property, many of which are unstable, will be repaired or reconstructed where necessary. So in order to evaluate the proposal, heritage staff first carefully assess the heritage attributes of the property. The existing house is an excellent example of Tudor Revival architecture, featuring a steeply pitched hip front entrance projection, stucco and half timbering, stone quoins and overhanging eaves with wood brackets. The landscape attributes of the property include the sloped terrace gardens, enjoyed both privately and from the public realm, the stacked dry stone retaining walls defining the contours of the property are also recognized as significant landscape attributes. Oh, excuse me. Furthermore, the adjacency to the dog walk, as well as the shoreline of Mackay Lake, and the natural park lake setting atop the ridge overlooking the lake are key defining heritage attributes of this important property within the district. Staff, although the addition is located at the rear of the house, due to the unique configuration of the lot and its contextual location next to the dog walk and the lake, staff also evaluated views of the addition from key vantage points within its vicinity. The proposed addition would be visible from a portion of the dog walk, from a trail located on the opposite side of Mackay Lake within the Caldwell Carver Conservation Area, as well as from the old Prospect Road. Having established the key cultural heritage attributes of the property and determining the key vantage points from the public realm, staff endeavored to review the proposal against the 1997 management guidelines for Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Staff finds that the proposal is consistent with these guidelines insofar as the proposed addition preserves the character-defining architectural elements and the Tudor Revival expression while complementing this architectural quality of the building. The contemporary addition is of its own time and provides a clear distinction between the heritage building and the new addition. The addition will be constructed of natural materials that are consistent with those used in Rockcliffe Park, as well as materials which are complementary to those of the original house, while providing a contemporary expression. The proposed addition maintains the overall topography of the property, which we look at more in later slides discussing the landscaping.
I'll now go through the analysis of the project in terms of the 2016 proposed Heritage Conservation District guidelines, which are currently under appeal to the OMB, so are not enforced in effect, but are being used as guidelines when assessing the application. The full policy will be on the left-hand side, and I'll just sort of summarize it, but if you're looking for it in its entirety, you'll see it there. So additions should be complementary to the existing building. The proposed addition uses natural materials that are sympathetic to the HCD, the existing building, and surrounding landscape. The stone on the ground floor complements the stone foundation of the existing house. The wood complements the timbering and cedar roof and uses a harmonious color palette. The simple rectilinear forms and horizontal profile complement the historic building by permitting the ornate, irregular, textured, Tudor Revival style architecture to continue to be read. The horizontal and contemporary design is clearly distinguishable from the Tudor style. The next policy is that addition shall be subordinate to the original building. The addition is located at the rear, which is simply less distinct than the other three facades and does not obscure the character-defining Tudor Revival style elements. It's set in on both sides and lower than the height of the existing building so that the architectural elements masking in proportion of the historic building can still be interpreted. Just draw your attention to this one here. Just when we are looking at the rear of the building, you'll see that this historic window, the eyebrow dormer, which I think is 2010? 2007, and then the historic window on this portion of the building are being retained, so they sort of frame the proposed addition. The integrity of the roof line of the house, such as gable, hip, flat, shall be respected. The steeply pitched hipped roof is retained in its entirety on 3 facades and remains prominent on all elevations, as you can see in these cross sections. At the rear of the building, the roof line is being maintained, although a portion of the top story of the addition will break the eaves. The original eaves line is reinterpreted through the addition of a muntin bar, which is contemporary interpretation of the roof line. Also notable is that the gable projection to the south is maintained as well. Windows should complement the building's original windows. The windows, as David mentioned, on the original building are being retained, and the windows to the north and south of the proposed addition are also being retained. The addition's proposing floor-to-glass walls as opposed to the windows. The clean, simple lines of these glass walls allow for the intricately detailed Tudor Revival style windows to remain prominent on the rear facade. The glazing on the top story has been designed to align with the window located further to the south. Additions shall not result in the obstruction or removal of heritage attributes. David's already detailed what is proposed to be removed. These elements are considered to be character-defining heritage attributes of the HCD or the existing building. The historic Tudor Revival style building and its notable architectural features such as the timbering, ornate windows, stone chimney, a regular roof line will be retained. The east facade to the north and south of the addition will remain visible. The last policy has to do with additions to grade 1 buildings being compatible with the historic streetscape. As you saw on the original map, this building is located far back from Fairview Avenue and actually doesn't interact with the streetscape. But in order to fully understand the impact of the addition, we analyzed it in terms of the dog walk, which is the pathway. Of these buildings, there's 3 grade 1 buildings, 250 Sylvan, 245 Sylvan, and the subject property at 551 Fairview Avenue. So this elevation illustrates that the proposal is compatible with these buildings along the dog walk in terms of height, scale, and massing. The house has been sited so it remains perched on top of the escarpment and does not descend down the terrace slope. Consistent with the houses to the south. Because it is set in on all sides, the addition does not alter the overall form and massing of the original Tudor Revival house, and the roof profile of the original building remains unchanged.
Sounds like Anne needs a little break.
David is helping me when I run out of breath.
So this slide shows, it's a setback analysis provided by the applicant. So I'll note that the measurements are approximate and taken from Geo Ottawa. So the setback of the addition is consistent with the setbacks of the buildings along the dog walk. And it's approximately 9 meters further back than the neighbor immediately to the south. This is another analysis provided by the applicant looking at building footprints. Again, the measurements are approximate and based on Geo Ottawa. The addition increases the footprint of the but analysis of nearby building footprints illustrate that the proposal is consistent with neighboring properties in terms of massing.
Here's a landscape plan for the proposed for the property. The existing landscape is a heavily treed lot and with a grade that slopes east towards the dog walk and the lake with terraced gardens to the east and north of the property. The landscape policies in the Rockcliffe Park plans in both the 1997 and 2016 plan aim to maintain the park-like attributes of the district and emphasize the importance of soft landscape over hard landscape, the retention of existing mature trees, and careful siting of additions and new constructions. The landscape alterations, David already mentioned the relocation of the driveway. The former driveway will be replaced with soft landscaping and a Japanese garden. To retain and reconstruct the existing dry stacked stone retaining walls and garden terracing here to the north of the property, and all the existing retaining walls and landscaping to the east will be retained in their entirety. There's 52 trees on the site. 6 are proposed to be removed, 4 of which are in poor condition, 2 of which are to accommodate the addition. 10 new trees are proposed to be planted. And we'll just highlight the retention of this retaining wall, which has been a big of the proposal, is to be retained in its entirety. It limits the addition to the high point of the lot and ensures that the unique topography and existing grades of the lot are being maintained. So just to go further on that principle, staff in working with the applicant came up with this design principle of this red box to sort of indicate that nothing inside here should be altered. We did this to achieve a couple of things: to conserve the heavily treed northern slope, to retain the existing, or to maintain retaining walls and change in grade that was significant down to the dog walk, and to ensure that the view from the dog walk sort of maintained that perched-like visibility. We did this based on a couple things. When you go to the site, that's one of the most notable features, that diagonal slash across the property. And we also used historic photos to come up with that. You can see just, oh, this line is sort of gone a little rogue, but it's, this shows the diagonal wall here in 1965. The diagonal wall is here in 2005. And with the addition situated the way it is, that will remain a prominent feature of the landscape of this property. These are just some photos showing...
Sorry, may I just interrupt? I'm just trying to understand the relevance of the position of the two lines between 1965 and 2005. Could you just...
They just said it stayed the same, that it's always, that this I'm sorry, these red lines are really not helpful, but because they're not in the right space, but we were trying to highlight this retaining wall that's here, and so you can see it's always there. Here it is in 1965, here it is in 2005, and if we go back, I think this one's 2014, it's there. And I'll show you one more photo. This is it here. So this is taken like 2 weeks ago. So this retaining wall is that same diagonal slash across the property that's being retained. Does that sort of clarify that? Okay.
So we can go here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is just a photo showing the portion outside the former garage to be replanted with the Japanese garden. These are the stacked stone retaining walls and the treed northern portion of the lot to be retained and replanted. Again, the stacked stone retaining walls, a view not quite from the dog walk, but sort of the corner of all the landscaping to be retained. And just to orient you, this is sort of that high point on the lot to which the addition would be limited to. The northern escarpment, and then views. So the last thing we wanted to talk about was the different views. David touched on them. There's three. One is from the portion of the dog walk in front of the property. The second is from Old Prospect Road, and the third is from the conservation area trail across the lake. So along the dog walk, if you look to your west, you'll see those 5 properties we saw in the elevation. To your east, you'll see Mackay Lake. These two, as you approach 551 Fairview on the dog walk, it's already quite screened. This is looking directly towards the house, so as you can see it here.
I just noticed the French translation is funny.
This is the other view from the dog walk where it sort of opens up and you get the biggest view of the property. The proposed addition will replace the existing view of the house with a contemporary architectural expression. There's a change in grade of approximately 6.5 meters going down from that addition to the grade, or addition to the dog walk, which provides you with that upward view. The addition is located approximately 21.5 meters away from the dog walk. The addition is also going to be visible on Old Prospect Road, so this is headed east down Old Prospect Road. Just behind the building to your right is the escarpment and the historic building. The top left shows a rendering of the proposed addition going up that northern escarpment.
No, the bottom one. The bottom photo.
Oh, I'm sorry. The bottom photo shows the proposed addition of the view from the escarpment. The top left shows what it looks like right now, and then the top right photo shows the screen view that is there when the trees are fully leaved. The last view is from the conservation area. You can see here we have the trail on the Caldwell Carver Conservation Area. This is a view of Mackay Lake, As you can see, there's many architecturally diverse buildings adjacent to the shoreline. Using just an approximation measurement on Geo-Ottawa, the addition to 551 Fairview will make it still remain the furthest recessed from the shoreline of Mackay Lake. We have this property, which was constructed in 2010. This property is from 1936. The Hart Massey House from 1963. The recently approved, we'll call it 2017, 575 Old Prospect to be constructed here. The subject property, 551 Fairview, and 599 Fairview, which was constructed in 1976. I'll just get you to highlight it. So renderings from across the lake show the property in the context of the dog walk, the lake, and the terrace gardens, and its view here. Yes. So as you can see in this rendering from across the lake, the massing, notably the steep-tipped roof and materials, can remain visible from this view, and the terrace gardens and mature vegetation are to remain. So this is a rendering showing the addition and the retaining walls and gardening. This door here sort of demarcates where the dog walk is, are all to be retained. And here on this northern portion of the lot is a heavily treed section that is to be retained as well. So we'll just highlight some of the changes that staff have worked on as part of the application and with the applicant to achieve reduction of the overall size of the addition and walkout terrace, retention of the sloped dry stacked stone retaining walls, the gardens and the vegetation adjacent to the pathway, reduction of the parking spaces, which are being proposed in the front from 2 to 3, addition of soft landscaping to the area of the former driveway, which results in an overall increase of soft landscaping on the property, and then additional vegetative screening to the neighbor to the south. In terms of the east facade, we worked with the applicant to reduce the size of the top story by 1.5 feet in height and 4 feet in width to allow the historic portions of the building to remain visible. The retention of historic windows to the north and south of the addition. A change in the materials to lighten the overall appearance. The addition of the mutton bar to pick up on the eaves line. The retaining walls we mentioned, and the maintaining of the existing grade. So in conclusion, staff are recommending approval of the application as it retains and restores the Tudor Revival building. It's located at the rear, set in on both sides, and lower than the height of the existing building. It's a contemporary addition that's of its own time that does not replicate a historic style. It contributes to the architectural character of the Rockcliffe Park HCD. It's compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the historic place. And with regards to landscaping, it retains the significant landscape elements to ensure the park-like setting of the HCD is conserved, including the mature trees, the slope, the grades, the stone retaining walls, and a significant setback from the dog walk. Staff's recommendation is to approve this application subject to the following condition: that a construction staging plan be submitted. The purpose of the construction staging plan is to address concerns that were raised by residents regarding where the construction would take place. There was concerns it would come in off the dog walk or the north slope, so we wanted to ensure that is not the case, so we'll review the construction staging plan in advance. To approve the landscape design for the new building, subject to the condition that a tree preservation and protection measures in the tree conservation report be implemented, and to issue the heritage permit with a 2-year expiry date and delegate authorities to minor changes to planning, infrastructure, and economic development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a very detailed presentation. Much appreciated. So with that, what we'll do is we'll move to our public delegations. As of right now, I think we have somewhere in the range of 16 members of the public who have signed up to speak. So we'll do that first, and then if there are questions and comments from members, those will follow. So I'll read out sort of a few in order so that people know if they're up next. If you could just be ready to approach this chair here. And again, all members of the public will have 5 minutes to speak, and I will be fairly strict in keeping you to that, to be fair. So first up is Julian Smith, followed by Victor Lanctis and Brian Dixon and Linda DeCare. So that's the order for the first few, and we'll start with Julian Smith, please.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. I'm not representing any of the three parties in this debate. I'm not representing the Heritage Planning Unit. I'm not representing the client. I don't even know who the owner is of this property, and I'm not representing the Heritage Conservation, the Committee of Rockcliffe residents. I'm here as an individual because I was the prime author of the original 1997 study, and I'm here because I'm very concerned by this application and by the more general pattern of what's happening not only in Rockcliffe, but as we just saw at 667 Bank Street. I'm not going to repeat what I said previously about the Ontario Heritage Act and the Planning Act, but there is a fundamental difference. And Rockcliffe Park was designated as a Heritage Conservation District. So what does that mean? It means that the cultural distinctiveness of that village is to be protected under the Ontario Heritage Act. And the province is very, very clear about that. And in fact, 2 months ago, they released a new statement saying cultural heritage resources and cultural heritage landscapes of significance will be protected, particularly in strategic growth areas. That means if you've got pressures for intensification, that's where the Heritage Act is even more important. It's not less important. And that's the direction, I think, to cities to say, you don't use intensification or the zoning patterns to justify undermining the character of heritage districts. So in that study, the two characteristics that I think are fundamental to the village of Rockcliffe Park, one is the continuous park landscape, and the other is the character of the architecture of that village. The continuous park landscape is what Thomas Kiefer said would be the key characteristic. He said these are going to be park and villa lots, which means you create a park, you set your villa in the middle of it. This is not an urban district. It was meant to be a rural place within or next to the urban landscape of Ottawa. And that continuous park landscape is very rare in Canada. There is no other district like this that has that level of continuity. If you look at Rosedale in Toronto, it's mostly about the architecture. The landscape is not nearly as dominant. If you look at Westmount, it varies from place to place. Shaughnessy Heights has a similar urban canopy, but all the properties are divided by walls and fences. Rockcliffe is really unique in Canada, and these two characteristics of the park landscape and the particular architecture of the village are fundamental to that. If those disappear, then there's really nothing left. This proposal does two things. First, in terms of the continuous park landscape, it interrupts that by taking a house that has been in the middle of the trees in the park landscape and adds a large addition which pushes out so that it becomes the primary dominant element from Lansdowne, which has been referred to as the dog walk, but it is a public road that is now used just for pedestrians. So that park landscape is suddenly interrupted by a very visible architecture that inverts the traditional predominance of the soft landscape over the hard landscape, which is identified throughout the study as a key characteristic of Rockcliffe. And then in terms of architecture, I don't see any way that one can argue that this addition, which is on the public face of the building, does anything except obliterate the architecture of a grade 1 building. That is the public face. If you look at the original Hazel Grove drawings, the living room and dining room and terrace are on that side of the building. That is the public face of the building. That's the face of the building that faces Lansdowne, that faces the lake. It's really misleading to say this is the rear of the building. This is where the character of Rockcliffe is either contributed to by this building or it's not. And the whole point of a Heritage Conservation District, and it was repeated, in fact, no, it's not on this slide, is to protect and enhance. And enhance means to reinforce the park landscape and to reinforce the value of the architecture that exists, which is, in this case, a Tudor Revival house. It's described as Japanese Scandinavian modernism. The flat surfaces of modernism, the glass, the smooth stone, the smooth ash, are not compatible with the Tudor Revival. I would ask, how would this design be different if it was a Gothic Revival house, or even if it was a Classical Revival house? This is simply, if Japanese Scandinavian modernism was to be used on a new house in the middle of a heavily treed lot somewhere in Rockcliffe, that's fine. But when you take a grade 1 building and say the public face of that building is going to be, in a sense, you can see from the views up, it disappears behind this very large new addition, then what is the point of the Heritage District? I want to read something that we wrote in 1997.
Just to warn you, we have about 20 seconds left, Mr. Smith.
Okay. From the beginning, there has been an unusually high level of consensus within the Rockcliffe Park Committee about its past, present, community about its past, present, and future. There's been acceptance of rural character and so on. The village should continue to exercise definitive local control on the nature and course of its future development. This is an essential feature of its heritage character. If the heritage planning staff is not willing to listen to the community of Rockcliffe, and I think there are a lot of people you're going to hear from, then I think we have to have a public forum on why there is heritage conservation staff in Ottawa if their job is not to protect the cultural heritage of this city. And I think this is a really serious problem. It's why I got up at 3 o'clock this morning to come to this meeting. And I would just beg you, because you're the committee under the Heritage Act that advises council, staff shouldn't be making recommendations. They have
Okay, I'm gonna ask you
no
to-
mandate under the Ontario Heritage Act.
I'm going to ask you to stop.
Okay.
I will look around to see if there are questions from committee members. Member Smallwood has a question.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate you being here, Julian. I have great respect for your opinions, and I know how much you've contributed to the village, and I don't disagree with much of what you say. I have a question, though, and that is, when I walk along, your first point was the continuous park landscape, and I assume by that you're referring to from the now closed section of Lansdowne Road called the Dog Walk. When I walk along it, I don't get a sense of a continuous park landscape anymore. Directly across from this property, there's a 9-foot portion of the property has got a 9-foot hemlock hedge which completely screens the lake from the dog walk. And there's other areas where it's heavily wooded, and then there's some areas that are like 245 Sylvain, which is open and very formal, and grass right down to it. So I'm interested in whether you feel there still is a continuous park landscape there, and is this something that is being intruded upon by other events along the thing and something that we should be concerned about? Thank you.
Yes, I think there are certainly intrusions in the continuous park landscape, but the idea of the predominance of the soft landscape, and by that I mean not just trees, but the hedges you're talking about, and the grass, and the what is normally called the soft landscape, as opposed to the hard landscape being the buildings, the hard surfaces and so on, is in balance. It's fragile in Rockcliffe. And if you continue to have approvals of places where the architecture and the hard landscape becomes dominant over the soft landscape, then I think the character of the village of Rockcliffe begins to disappear, and that contradicts 150 years of history. I mean, Thomas Kiefer was the one who said this will be a place where, in order to buy a property from Thomas Kiefer, you had to agree to plant trees along the public side of your property, which in this case meant on the Lansdowne side of it, meaning you were going to see your house through the trees. Well, that is the dominance of soft landscape over hard landscape. Nobody else was doing that in Ottawa. In fact, nobody else was doing that in Canada at the time, saying, we are going to force you to make the soft landscape dominant. So it's a really key characteristic. And yes, there's throughout the village, but this is just an instance where this application, I think, deals with both the landscape and the architecture in ways that are contradict the cultural heritage value of the village.
So if one were to plant a hedge along the dog walk on this property on 551, it would be soft landscaping and you wouldn't see the addition. Would that be acceptable?
Well, no, because then you don't see the, I mean, the addition is blocking the house. That Tudor Revival house is a really important element when you're walking along that part of Lansdowne. And it's set within the trees, which is exactly the idea of Rockcliffe. And Hazel Grove was one of the, along with Alan Kiefer, the two people who really gave Rockcliffe its identity. It's really important to see that. Once, if the addition is built, the house has disappeared. And yes, at that point you could design a hedge, but at that point the battle is lost. I think this is cultural heritage in danger. I mean, this is what the National Trust does every year, is to identify the 10 most endangered places in Canada. And Rockcliffe Village can't continue this way with a community which has always controlled its own future. If it gets ignored by the heritage staff and by the planning staff and by this committee and by council, then we're back in 1970 before heritage legislation existed.
Mr. Smith, I just had a question with regard to your statement that the rear of the house is not rear of the house. And I'm not an architect, but in looking at the property and looking at what Hazel Grove's intention was, from the point of view of where the half timbering took place and so on, it looks to the non-expert like the front of the house was treated like the front of the house, and the rear has much less adornment, much less treatment in terms of some of those architectural details. So while I'm not disagreeing with the point that the dog walk is and should be treated as a public streetscape, I'm a little bit curious about what you thought was in the mind of the architect, and why, if the rear of the property was not to be the rear, were there not architectural approaches to reflect that?
Well, I would say that period in the 1920s, the clearest example of how an architect is thinking about a house is where you put the kitchen, because the kitchen was in the rear of the house. The kitchen in this house, if you look at Hazel Grove's drawings, is on that west side, which is being called the front entrance, and the service areas. The living room and dining room and terrace, all those major public rooms are on what I would call the. Yes, there is attention to the guest arriving at the house and having a Tudor Revival facade, but the design of the facade facing Mackay Lake was a very public facade. The terrace was obviously visible from Lansdowne, and I would just regard that as a public face. So saying it's an addition on the rear of the house, I think is completely wrong in this case. I think there isn't a rear of the house. There's an entrance side of the house, which is coming up the driveway, which is for private visitors. And then there's the public face of the house, and the dominant public face is Mackay Lake. And I think you just look at his plans, and that's where it's clearest.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Seeing no other questions, I'd like to thank you for coming and speaking. And so we'll go through the list. So Victor Lanctus, followed by Brian Dixon, Linda DeCare. Good morning and welcome to the subcommittee. You have 5 minutes. Thanks.
Well, here we go. Good morning indeed, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I confirm that I'm indeed the person that you're looking at, Vic Lanctus. I've been a resident of Rockcliffe Park for 25 years, and I would like to add my voice to those in the community who oppose the proposal before you. 551 Fairview Avenue is a Grade 1 heritage property, one of the most important and desirable in Rockcliffe. In a recent survey, it scored 93 of 100 on environment and landscape setting, 94 of 100 on architecture, among the highest in the entire village. The Rockcliffe Park Heritage Plan, approved by the city in 2016, and the 1997 study and guidelines that led to its designation were intended to protect the unique heritage character of the village. They clearly stipulate that any alterations or additions to a Grade 1 building must, quote unquote, protect and enhance such buildings. The proposed addition, I would say, does not protect or enhance those characteristics, as repeatedly expressed in the very explicit terms in the Rockcliffe Heritage Committee report provided to you. In fact, it significantly detracts from them in a number of ways, two of which I would like to now address. First of all, the overpowering size of the proposed addition is far from, quote unquote, subordinate to the existing home as required by the plan. What purports to be an addition can only be described as another building uneasily grafted onto a Grade 1 heritage structure it claims to complement. Viewed from the north elevation, its footprint is just about equal to that of the existing house, as seen in this projection, and hardly subordinate to it. I'm aware of the claim that it's only 40% or thereabouts of the main building floor space, but even 40% can hardly be judged as subordinate. The image that you see pretty well conclusively demonstrates that the extensive footprint that it occupies and why the proposal does not conform with either the spirit or intent of the Heritage Plan, namely that additions must be of lesser importance and secondary to the main building. It's an addition that simply does not add up. Second, I would like to submit that the proposed addition is in serious conflict with the aesthetic charm and historic style of this unique and outstanding Tudor Revival Hazel Grove home. While the plan dictates that any additions must be of their own time, it also states quite clearly that they must harmonize and be sympathetic to the predominant structure. And I quote again, new buildings and additions should be recommended for approval only where siting, form, materials, detailing are sympathetic to the surrounding natural and cultural environment, unquote. The modernistic cascading box design, as cited with its flat roof, use of contrasting materials, clearly contradicts the prevailing architectural vocabulary of the existing home. The large second floor projection above the sprawling mass of the new building simply exacerbates the problem and further obliterates the Grade 1 home from view instead of celebrating it. Something especially evident when viewed from the dog walk at the base of the bluff, and there are illustrations that show that. I personally have no quarrel with the design itself for another building in another location, but not on this site. Finally, and most unfortunately, the overwhelming size of the proposal destroys a significant portion of fine surrounding gardens and landscape features that contribute to the cultural landscape of the property. I would like to close, if I may, on a more philosophical note. The Heritage Village of Rockcliffe Park is a treasure, one of very few in our country, perhaps even in the world. Ironically, this is also what attracts buyers and developers who, while being seduced by the area's exceptional appeal, at times, and no doubt unintentionally, undermine the very fragile and sensitive characteristics that define it. That has resulted over the years in a proliferation of excessively large and overpowering houses, the destruction of surrounding greenery, and the loss of many park-like features that are the hallmark of the area. This proposal, unfortunately, conflicts in some critical aspects with the spirit and intent of the Heritage Plan.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to stop because I gave you 15 extra seconds.
You did, but you didn't warn me. Hopefully, our interventions here will result in positive steps necessary to preserve what makes Rockcliffe so special and unique to our city, to our province, and to Canada. Thank you for the extra 15 minutes.
Thank you for speaking this morning, and I'm looking around to see if there are any questions. I see none, so again, thank you for coming out this morning. Next on the list is Brian Dixon and Linda DeCare, and I understand you'd like to come up together. No? Separately. Okay, that's fine. And followed by Margot Gualtieri and Guhar Shemden. So that's our order as of right now. Good morning and welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to comment this morning. My name is Brian Dixon. I'm the Vice President of the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association and a member of its Heritage Committee. The role of the Heritage Committee is clearly defined in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan, which strongly encourages applicants to consult with the committee prior to the submission of an application under the Ontario Heritage Act. The committee provides comments on proposals for new construction and alterations in the HCD. I'd just like to hold up a photograph here, which is actually on the screen. It happens to be the front page of the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement, and it shows appearance in summer of the proposed addition from public lands. We happen to use exactly the same picture in our report, but perhaps they were put on the front page for different reasons. From our perspective, you can see that the addition, as Julian Smith said, makes the Tudor Revival house simply disappear. You can't see it. So that does us to be subordinate or a sympathetic treatment to the Tudor Revival house. Following on, I'd note the Heritage Committee provided comprehensive and detailed comments and heritage impact evaluation dated October 26, 2017, with respect to this application. I think that has been circulated to you. We gave this proposal careful consideration in light of the heritage character of the Rockcliffe Park HCD, federal standards and guidelines, and with provincial and municipal frameworks for heritage conservation, in particular the 2016 HCD plan and the guidelines contained in the 1997 HCD study. Our careful methodical evaluation of this proposal concludes that it does not achieve best conservation principles and practice and does not satisfy the spirit and the word of legislated frameworks. Additions to Grade 1 houses in the HCD should contribute to and enhance its cultural values. This proposed addition does not. To be clear, the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Committee is not opposed to an addition to 551 Fairview, but is opposed to this particular concept of an addition. This property and the ensemble of early properties that perch high above the dog walk by Mackay Lake are a very important and highly visible part of the history and essential heritage of Rockcliffe Park. We determined that the proposed addition to the house has a significant negative impact on the east lakeside facade and roof of the house itself, and on the experiential qualities of the dog walk right of way. The proposal is not subordinate, as I suggested a moment ago, to the building overall, and in particular to the east facade. We recognize that some adjustments have been made to the earlier version of the application, but we don't believe that they are sufficiently responsive to achieve of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan. We have some, how much time do I have? Oh, I still have some time. The following are a more detailed observation with respect to the provisions of the HCD plan. Alterations and additions to existing buildings. There are some pretty clear guidelines. Additions shall be complementary to the existing building, subordinate to it, and compatible with it. Additions should also be compatible with the historic character of buildings in the associated streetscape and not result in the obstruction or removal of heritage attributes. We believe that the proposed addition is not complementary nor subordinate to the existing Grade 1 building. It overwhelms it. The alterations and additions are not compatible with the historic character of buildings along the dog walk in terms of scale, massing, and setback up the cliff side. The four early houses are all set back high up the cliff, which constitutes the historic character of the buildings. The addition obstructs the heritage attributes of the historic lakeside facade and the historic lakeside setting, landscape setting, above the dog walk, a heritage attribute of the HCD. We find the same considerations apply to the landscape guidelines.
15-second warning.
Okay.
Yeah.
In our view, the proposal is inconsistent with the landscape guidelines, and we also consider the application does not comply with similar provisions in the 1997 guidelines. In conclusion, for these reasons, we would ask you to refuse this application and to ask city staff, the applicant, and the committee to work together towards a design for an addition that is consistent with the heritage protections in place for the HCD.
Okay, thank you very much for that statement. I don't see any questions, so maybe I'll pose one myself. Both in your statement and in your oral statement, you speak about the overall historic sense of place. The proposal obstructs the principal view of the historic Grade 1 building from the dog walk. You talk about the experiential quality of the dog walk. And one element of this application that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and think I understand it quite yet is the following. What is the public owed? So if I'm walking north along the dog walk, what, in your opinion, does the Heritage Conservation District establish in terms of my right to view sheds, both to the right on the lake, if I'm walking north, and to the west? So what is my right as a member of the public?
I think I could answer that just by quoting or paraphrasing the landscape guidelines. Additions to existing buildings shall respect the heritage attributes of the lot's hard and soft landscape. So to respect the existing character of a lot be preserved, as well as setbacks, topography, and existing grades, trees, pathways, and special features such as stone walls and front walks. To answer your question more directly, I'm not sure that there's an absolute right that anyone has to look in any particular place, but I think, as Julian Smith mentioned, there is a broad expanse, which in certain places there are some encroachments, but overall I think it's a broad sweep of property which the heritage plan is designed to protect.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. All right, so thank you for coming out this morning.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll ask Linda DeCare to come next, please. Good morning. I think it's going to be difficult. It's important that people are able to hear you in the microphone.
Okay, if you don't hear me, do this and I'll sit down.
Okay, well, I'll look to the audience too, but
Okay.
please start.
Or something if I'm not loud enough. I'm usually accused of being too loud. So I may start? Thank you. So welcome to Rockcliffe Park, and I would like to extend that welcome to young new families, including Daniel Wyden and his wife Joëlle Parenteau. Nous vous souhaitons la bienvenue, même si on a commencé du mauvais pied. So, slide change, right. So Rockcliffe Park is a heritage conservation district designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. Grade 1 buildings are designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The Rockcliffe Park Heritage Committee does not oppose an addition to 551 Fairview. It opposes this particular concept for an addition. The committee would like to work with city staff and the proponent towards achieving our collective aspirations. Nope. What are cultural landscapes? Cultural landscapes are those where human interaction with natural systems has, over a long period, formed a distinctive landscape. These interactions are and cause cultural values to develop. Here you will see Parliament Hill is one such example, Maple Lawn Gardens that we know, and also Versailles. So Rockcliffe Park Heritage District is in good company. It is a cultural landscape. It seeks to conserve those cultural values and the attributes for heritage character defining elements that represent those values of the Heritage Conservation District. Grade 1 buildings are designated landscape elements in Rockcliffe Park and are one of its many attributes. The relationship between Grade 1 buildings and their grounds, and the relationship between the Grade 1 building and their grounds and the broader natural and man-made landscape. Rockcliffe Park is a clearly defined landscape designed and created intentionally by Thomas Kiefer. Rockcliffe Park represents a landscape constructed with specific
picturesque design intentions. And that is what comes back in the plan, and that answers your question, Councillor Nussbaum. It is the product of design and represents high intentions. It's going to take me longer if I can't change my slides. The wholeness or integrity of the cultural landscape is related to the survival of the forces that shape the landscape. The wholeness or integrity, and I will say this once, we have words in those documents, those words have meaning, they are not interchangeable. And if you want to know the legal definition of the words that I'm using today and how I got there, I can tell you. The wholeness or integrity of the cultural landscape, wholeness and integrity mean the same thing. Integrity also means completeness. Is related to the survival of the components that shape the landscape, such as grade 1 buildings, their ground, their relationship to natural features. Rockcliffe enjoys those forces of continued residential use, but it also faces powerful forces of a very high degree of intervention, damaging to the cultural landscape of Rockcliffe Park. The survival of whole grade 1 buildings and the survival of their relationship to natural features, if conserved, communicate the cultural landscape of Rockcliffe Park. We've heard a lot about what is of its own time. Well, if you go on the Claridge site, on the Minto site, on the Richcraft site, if you go to the Henrik Farm in Chelsea, these are all current proposals for new residents. They are of our time. Or is this of our time? Or is this of our time? This is Philip Johnson's glass box, 1940. This is 70 years ago. Is this of our time? What about this one? Elliot Noyes House, 1954. It's 63 years old. Is that of our time? And I would dare advance that there are some similarities here. Is this of its own time? How about interiors? Is this of its own time? This is circa 2017. How about this one? Shopify's Quiet Room, which has warm and cozy feeling to it. Anybody would want to sit there to be quiet. The demonstration of what is of its own time is not clear, as we would like to believe. We must look for direction to the Rockcliffe Heritage Conservation Plan. New additions shall not result in the obstruction or removal of heritage attributes of the building or of the Heritage Conservation
I'm trying to
District.
give more warning from now on, 30 seconds.
Okay, well then I'm just going to go through the slides for your edification, and you can ask me questions after. Shall be complementary to the building, subordinate. Subordinate means of less importance. This is the proposed addition and the existing. Alterations and additions shall be designed to be compatible. This is not compatible. The streetscape is Lansdowne Park. All the surveys show Lansdowne Park, as you see here, as a road, not as a dog walk. The Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan indicates that the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada are to be applied. They don't say they're just sort of there to help. Do not remove or substantially alter the intact. Substantially alter and removal is conserve heritage value. The proposed addition is heavy-handed. If you look at the general standards, create new
I'm going to
additions
have to
for
ask you to
related.
stop because
Okay.
I too gave you 15 seconds.
Very well.
So thank you very much for your presentation. You've raised a lot of issues. I know some of them I'm certain will come up in the course of the discussion and questions. Are there any specific questions to Ms. DeCare at this stage? I don't see any, so thank you again for
You're
coming
very
this
welcome.
morning. And so we'll keep going through our list. So next is Margot Gualtieri, followed by Guhar Shemden.
Can I have that to my level? Good morning, Chair and other councillors.
Good morning. Welcome.
I rehearsed this with my daughter, and it came out in 2 minutes. So I hope I don't slow down because of nervousness and take up more time. I am in a total agreement, and I support those this morning who have spoken, given reports of submission, opposing plans for renovations to 551 Fairview. A Grade 1 house built in 1927, it's going to be repetitive, I'm afraid, which sits in a row of 5 houses of the same vintage in a lovely and respected area of Rockcliffe Park on a high bank which overlooks the lake. With majority approval in 2006 by City Council, including Mayor Watson, Rockcliffe Park's Heritage Conservation Plan was passed. The guidelines of the 1997 document, Study and Guidelines, stepped further towards protection against what we face today, though over the years, new owners of houses in the village have complied with, quote, rules and regulations of preserving the ambiance, charm, and pleasure of living on its tree-lined winding streets and its true park-like setting. The 551 Fairview Avenue plans will not be adhering to these in very many ways, nor to the Heritage Plan, which is under dispute. Julian Smith is a renowned heritage architect and city planner, and he concludes his critique of these plans in despair over the proposed additions and subtractions. He lists them all and doubts the possibility of a truly observing heritage village coming into effect, such as Rockcliffe. I am supporting Julian Smith in opposing this proposal. A 1920s photograph of an attached balcony has been doubted as an original architectural design and therefore prohibited from removal, and a large extension to the house has been envisaged in its stead. Thomas d'Aquino lists detailed objections and disregard of the, quote, complementary and compatibility of 551 Fairview with its neighbors. I am totally supporting Tom d'Aquino against this proposal. I've been a householder in Rockcliffe for 50 years and a resident for 80. I admire new architecture, but not bits of new attached to old, without a feeling of sensitivity, acknowledgement of disproportion, and not adhering to heritage values. Thank you.
Well, that was well-timed. It was about 3 minutes, so perfectly done. So are there any questions to Ms. Gualtieri? I see none, so I want to thank you for coming out this morning. Much appreciated. So next on the list is Guhar Shemden, followed by Jane Dobell, and then good morning and welcome.
Shall I start? Yeah. Shall I push this? Yeah, it's on. Is it on? Okay. Good morning. My name is Guhar Shemden. I am a conservation architect, a resident of Rockcliffe Park, and a next-door neighbor to 551 Fairview Avenue. As such, we have discussed our specific concerns with the prospective owner, but here I would like to speak as a member of the community. My husband and I support Rockcliffe Park Residents Association's position with respect to the proposed addition to this Grade 1 heritage property, and we support what Julian Smith and Tom d'Aquino have submitted with respect to it. The Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan was unanimously approved by the city. In accordance with that public commitment, we ask you to decline this proposal. The issue is not one of modern versus heritage designated architecture. We like modern architecture in the right setting. We appreciate and enjoy the diversity of architecture of this Heritage Conservation District, and the fact that it is a 100-year-old residential park one of only 2 or 3 in North America. Rockcliffe Park is a mix of older heritage homes and some very modern homes. A finely crafted glass box on a terraced hillside can be a thing of beauty in the right setting. This is not that setting. Contemporary architects are trained to make personal statements as their signature expression and vision. However, heritage architects are bound by conservation principles and guidelines to respect the vision and expression of a previous designer, the architect of the original building and its grounds. There is no place for an architect's personal vision to dominate a heritage building to the detriment of its heritage value. Unfortunately, the concept of this proposed addition has not been guided by standards and guidelines accepted nationally that Canada values and is a proud signatory to them. What is the use of designating an area as a heritage conservation district if the guidelines are not to be followed? There is a dangerous precedent in allowing proposals like this to move forward. The proposal fails to satisfy various conservation requirements. I will not list all the ones that the previous speakers have mentioned, but I would like to mention that the modifications that are going to take place with this proposal are all modifications have to be under conservation principles reversible and to retain the authenticity of the building and to be useful for the subsequent use of future occupants. That is not the case in this proposal. The original fabric is to be protected, and we understand that a good deal of it is going to be removed. What we have here is a fine Tudor revival heritage home in perfect structural condition on a beautiful terraced hillside overlooking McKay Lake. Its aesthetic value is expressed from the point of view of seeing the house from Lansdowne Road alongside the lake, which is the public face of the house. Tacking a glass box on that public face, almost entirely obscuring the original house, cannot be consistent with protecting the heritage character. Also, the original wall behind the addition will be removed, along with parts of the original interior, floors, walls, and roof. This will be an irreversible act, and reversibility is a conservation principle. The value of a designated historic district is that its heritage character remains protected. Rockcliffe Park is the only residential park of its kind in Canada. As such, it should remain a point of pride for the city and the country. You have a public duty to protect this home's heritage value. We ask that you decline this application. And as much as we would like to welcome the applicant as a valued neighbor, we suggest that he and his advisors review this design and return with a proposal that is more in keeping with the heritage plan.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to give you your 15-second warning. Are you finished? Oh, you're all done? That's great. Okay, perfect timing, actually. Thank you for that statement. Any questions from members? I see none, so thank you for coming out this morning and speaking. So next on the list is Jane Dobell, followed by Peter Thompson, and then John Stewart.
I don't think Jane Dobell is here this morning.
Okay. All right, so we'll turn to Peter Thompson, followed by John Stewart and Jacob Bolduc. Good morning and welcome to the subcommittee.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here on behalf of my daughter, Tracy Thompson, Dr. Tracy Thompson. She lives at 551 Fairview Avenue, right across the street from this property. She unfortunately couldn't be here. Her husband, Mike, is also out of town, so I'm here with the retirees, but I'm speaking on behalf of the younger generation. And let me just begin with a historical anecdote. My grandmother was a Kiefer, and her grandmother was the daughter of James Kiefer, who was the brother of Thomas Coltrane Kiefer. So there's a faint tint of Kiefer in these submissions, which I hope will give them the weight they deserve. I'm here on behalf of Tracy and Michael to support the application. And in supporting it, Tracy and Michael, I think, really want to make a couple of points. First of all, this heritage compliance exercise is a challenging one for you, the elected representatives, whose responsibility it is to make that determination. The determination should be made, I respectfully submit, on an objective basis. It's not a subjective exercise. We're not here on a referendum. You should examine the requirements and determine on the basis of the recommendations of the people that do this kind of thing on a daily basis as to whether there is or is not compliance. So it's objective and not subjective, and it's not how many are voting one way and how many are voting another. The question really is I would suggest, in determining this objective issue, is what criteria should influence the objective determination. And one of them, I suggest, is what has been approved previously. If you look at the neighborhood and ask yourself and recognize the diversity of the buildings that have been going on there, I believe that and suggest you should need to take that into account when you're considering the compliance or non-compliance of this particular project. And there have been many approvals granted recently, and one, the OMB, as I understand it, approved something just across the street on Lansdowne Road from this particular building that contemplated two structures, quite different than what was there before. And so that's a precedent that I suggest you should take into account. Essentially, this comes down to a question of taste. And if you want newcomers to the community to take up these older buildings and maintain and change them, then you should permit them to design something that suits their tastes but is compatible with the codes and bylaws and everything else that the city administers. So newcomers should be allowed the design that the city officials determine is available and is compatible with all of the codes and guidelines. So I stand back and ask myself, is this a tasteful design? And I would suggest the answer is yes, nothing wrong with it. Does it impair the dog walk? I would suggest the answer is no. The dog walk's not the yellow brick road, and even if it was, this particular design is so far away from it that it's not really causing it any harm whatsoever.
I'm just going to give you the 15-second warning.
Yeah. Well, that's it from the faint taint of Kiefer blood, and I urge you to do your duty. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming this morning and speaking on behalf of your daughter and son-in-law. Much appreciated. So next on the list is John Stewart, followed by Jacob Bolduc.
Good morning again. Commonwealth prepared the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement, and I know you're all aware, but the intent of the impact statement, or the intent of the conservation statement, is to determine impact. And I think that's probably the crux of this. How does this impact on the building itself, on the property, and in the context of the community? When you talk of the addition, in fact, it does respond to the adjacent heritage context. It's quite interesting the way it sits. It's overlooking the Mackay Lake. You talk about the picturesque quality, and in fact, it does capture that. It takes a role that from the distant view, the picturesque view, it establishes that idea of foreground, middle ground, background from the distant view. It also establishes that picturesque quality from the dog walk, where you do retain the foreground, you do retain the middle ground, and then the building as a background. I think most important, it still maintains a role subservient to the Hart Massey House, with the Hart Massey House being the eye catcher and that particular vocabulary. This building sets back from that. In terms of the gardens and the landscape, the concept of picturesque is not to have just trees and continuous trees. The idea is to be able to have picture-like views. So the views through the trees, the views through the garden, and you again establish that idea of foreground, middle ground, and background. And the building does that as well. It's I think probably in terms of impact, the most important aspect of it is that it does respect and largely conserves the existing Tudor building. The three facades are preserved and will be restored. Julian talked about the idea of what was front of the building, what was the back of the building, but in reality, the formal entrance is the other side of the building, where the addition is going on was historically treated as the rear of the building in terms of fenestration, in terms of detailing. And the idea that this is a cultural landscape is important in this terminology as well, because when you talk about cultural landscape, you're talking about the ability to include time as an element in the changes that take place. When you look at a landscape, there is growth, there is renewal, there is decay, trees fall down. I think you can look at Rockcliffe Park right now and talk about it as the hosta capital of Canada because of the amount of shade. At one time, some of these areas were open. But in fact, and when you talk about culture, there is an opportunity for change. And so what was used as the kitchen, perhaps at this point becomes a living room space. It's important to note that this building, one of the interesting features of the original Tudor building was the ability to drive a car and park within the building. And I think that feature was unique to this particular design. And in fact, the new addition incorporates that feature as well. It definitely is a different expression.
30 seconds.
Thank you. It definitely is a different expression, but I feel that in terms of a cultural landscape and in terms of an area like Rockcliffe Park, to lock into one design or one stylistic is not the intent was of the conservation district. In fact, that the ability to have different expressions and to be actually an opportunity to see new buildings that will become heritage features.
Okay, thank you very much for that comment. I'll actually pose a question, which is in your cultural heritage impact statement, you provide what I consider a very useful chart where you map what you think the relevant provisions of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan are, and then you provide your understanding of how the application does or does not fit with those. And so if I can ask you a question with regard to one of them, which is 6.4.1, which reads, all additions to grade 1 buildings shall be complementary to the existing building, subordinate to and distinguishable from the original, and compatible in terms of massing, facade proportion, and roof line. And in your subsequent comment, you say, the design approach to the proposed addition is one of contrast. The addition is secondary in terms of size, largely subordinate with the exception of the proposed second floor. And so my question to you, Mr. Stewart, is it correct then to read that statement as saying you don't necessarily believe that the second story proposed addition is subordinate then to the second floor of the original house?
The second floor is the bedroom wing. It replaces two dormer windows. They line to the replacement. The architect's interpretation, and I don't disagree with it, is that this is a contemporary expression of that treatment of the dormer window. It definitely is, it alters the character along that particular facade, and so yes, I would say it's not subordinate, but it does, in fact, represent part of an architectural interpretation.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Stewart? I see none, so thank you very much for coming to speak to us on this item this morning.
You're very welcome.
Next on my list is Jacob Baldock, followed by James Taylor, and then Alex Macklin. I just want to clarify, because Mr. Casagrande, I have you down as well. Are you both taking your 5 minutes now, or is this just one section?
I think we may be able to cover both of our interests in 5 minutes, so
Okay.
that's the hope.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. My name is Jacob Bolduc. I'm a planner with Foten Consultants. With me is Brian. Just to take a step back and focus a little bit, obviously we had a presentation from staff that covered a lot of the planning elements that we would normally take care of. I'd like to focus my attention on some of the landscaping elements, which, as you heard, the landscape in Rockcliffe Park is obviously significant. We talk about the park-like setting, we talk about the topography, the mature trees, the lush landscaping, and it's all the significant elements of Rockcliffe Park. On this particular site, due attention was paid to these elements to ensure that we are preserving or enhancing these elements, and some of that kind of worked into the planning and design on the site plan itself. So one thing I'd like to pay attention to is the moving of the driveway to the south side. Whereas previously the driveway passed in front of what we call the front wall of the building, and you around, headlights swinging over Old Prospect Road, turning into the garage. The difference here is that we moved it to the south side so that we can move that vehicular retention and that garage away from the street so that we can improve the streetscape on Old Prospect Road. Evidently, there is a strong grade change from Old Prospect up to the house with these stacked retaining walls and other types of landscaped elements, stone that with some natural plantings there. The Japanese garden that will sit on top that replaces the driveway is actually quite significant and ensures that we have more of this lush landscaping contributing to the streetscape in the public realm along Old Prospect, which hasn't received a lot of attention so far. The driveway moving to the south side obviously pushes the vehicular access to the inside of the site and improves the landscaping along the edge. The other elements that I'd like to bring up are the retaining wall, which we have worked diligently with staff in order to retain, to ensure that the house and the addition both sit on top of the cliff, because we know that that is an important element that shares, that is shared with many of the other houses along what we call the dog walk. So in order to site the building on top, that was a top priority for us. The location of the addition is similar to where the existing veranda is sited. So we know that that is, instead of just punching it out somewhere else, we were sympathetic to the existing design and additions that have been made since the original building. I suppose the consideration for landscaping is the trees. We're preserving the vast majority of the mature trees on the property. We have looked at several different orientations of the driveway, and one took out a tree, and we changed that so that we could help preserve as many as possible. That's sort of the angle that we took for the landscaping, was to take a look at what we have, something that is significant and that is identified in the Heritage Survey and Evaluation Form, and how we can work with it and make it better. Moving the driveway, keeping the retaining wall, planting some of the landscaping, and ensuring that the soft landscaping still dominates the site was definitely the intent of this design, and I think the proposed design achieves that.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee. Brian Casagrande. Just 2 points that I wanted to make quickly. First, and this is really sort of responsive to what we've heard. First is that we heard some concerns over staff, the way I read it, as being sort of the gatekeepers of heritage, and heritage in this case in the Rockcliffe Park Village. And I took exception to that, and I want the committee to be aware that when we deal with staff in with respect to all matters of heritage, we view them as extremely collaborative, highly opinionated, and at times difficult to deal with, only from the perspective that, you know, when they have an opinion on something, they're strong on it, and they have a real independent objective to try and preserve the heritage interests of the city. They're extremely qualified, and we have the greatest respect for them, regardless of whether we're on the same page or not. So I want this committee to know that you're well served by your staff with respect to that. Secondly, I'd like the committee to understand, like, as planners, we have an interesting and unique opportunity. A heritage application comes before us. It's not our strong expertise. We have to intermesh it with planning considerations, and effectively we're left with relying heavily on the experts that we deal with. I've had about 6 files in Rockcliffe Park since I've been with FOTEN, and that's over 14, 15 years. Most of those have been in the last 6 years, and I would say it's about 6 files running now where I'm left really scratching my head oftentimes, because, you know, we read the guidelines. These guidelines, as you know, have changed since the original study to the plan. And interpret them as best we can as planners. Then we turn to our experts and staff to say, are you reading this the way we're reading it? And invariably, we feel like we meet all of these policies and these guidelines. I can think of one exception where we were in the opposite side or page of staff, which was the Buchan hearing, which recently took place. But in all of those circumstances, we're at odds with the RPRA. And I find it very frustrating. These guidelines have gotten more stringent, they've gotten more extensive, and you follow them, and then you're left with the conclusion that either you're supposed to leave things frozen completely in time, or maybe the RPRA are the ones who are supposed to design the building. And I find that really frustrating. So I'm leaving that as my final comment. You'll hear from the architect shortly.
Okay. I have some thoughts on that statement, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold off, and I'm going to speak to it when I wrap up. I disagree with some of the comments you made, but now is not the time. So in my wrap-up comments, I'll get back to a few of those moments. Are there any other comments or questions from members? I see none, so thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on the list is James Taylor, followed by Alex Macklin. Good morning and welcome to the sub.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, my name is James Taylor. I live at 541 Manor Avenue in Rockcliffe. My house is a heritage house, and I've lived in it for 40 years. For about half that time, I was directly involved in heritage matters, first as a councillor in the former village, and since amalgamation as a member of the Heritage Committee of the Residents Association. I was much involved in the moves to designate Rockcliffe as a heritage conservation district, and in the process of harmonizing and adjusting the structures and regulations of the former village as it was amalgamated with the new city of Ottawa. From this experience, I've drawn several conclusions which I believe are relevant to today's discussions. First, as the owner of a heritage house in a heritage district, certain features of my house were cited in justifying its heritage status under Ontario law. These are to be preserved unchanged. Other unlisted features could be altered. When it became necessary to make repairs to our house early in our occupancy, I consulted the Heritage Committee of the village and obtained their advice. As a result, I was able to make the required repairs linked with modifications designed to appear as if they'd always been part of the original structure. Admittedly, this was for a relatively modest project, but it demonstrated, at least in my experience, that by consulting the heritage authorities in advance and instructing his architect and contractor accordingly, an applicant can arrange to have a heritage property modified while respecting the heritage guidelines. Second, as a volunteer councillor and Heritage Committee member for some 20 years, the Rockcliffe community debated the question of heritage status for the village several times over the years. Finally, this status was registered just before amalgamation of the former village with the city of Ottawa. Then these arrangements had to be assimilated into the structures of the city and harmonized with them. This was successfully accomplished over a decade ago. The heritage plans and guidelines have been developed since within the framework of the city and in consultation with the Rockcliffe community. Throughout, there has been strong community support. In short, these are a set of top-down authoritarian regulations imposed by some reactionary minority on unwilling ratepayers. On the contrary, they are the expression, repeatedly tested and affirmed over the years, of a democratic consensus. This consensus was originally developed within the former village and has been confirmed with renewed authority within the city. This suggests to me that there must be extremely strong reasons indeed to make an exception to these rules, and that it does no injustice to an applicant to require him to abide by them. Finally, do the heritage guidelines forbid change? Of course not. Rockcliffe's urban landscape is constantly changing. The rules, in fact, retain a good deal of flexibility. They are more permissive than those in other heritage districts. The village architecture covers the entire range from various revival styles to thoroughly contemporary designs. On my street alone at this moment, there are 3 major reconstructions of older houses in progress and 1 entirely new construction. Yet in all this, the original concept of houses in a park-like setting has been successfully preserved. In my view, we have found a way, as a community, to preserve the best of the past with a realistic recognition of the need for change and adaptation. We would be foolish not to protect and build upon this success.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. Are there any questions or comments? No, I see none, so thank you for coming out this morning.
Thank you.
So we have Alex Macklin, followed by Richard Sean, and then John Mearns. Good morning and welcome.
Alec Macklin. I've lived for many years at the bottom of Maple Lane in Rockcliffe Park, which is a short walk away from the dog walk. when I first moved to Maple Lane, it was a brand-new house on a property with devoid of trees, and I took right away to plant a lot of trees, so now the house is surrounded by trees, which is quite what we like in our area. As I say, I'm a very short walk from the dog walk, and I've walked on that many, many, many times and enjoyed it thoroughly. My primary concern is that what is proposed here will change the character of the walk completely. It's a lovely area overlooking Mackay Lake and the lovely old houses up on the bluff, and it should be preserved in that fashion. The proposal will change all that. In my view, it should be preserved as it is. The big old house is wonderful, sitting there and looking out over Mackay Lake. I just feel that we should leave things as they are. It is a wonderful area. The houses are old. They've been there a long time. There's lots of green space around them, and what's proposed here will change that significantly. And in my view, it should not be allowed to happen. And so therefore, I would submit that this should not be allowed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for speaking this morning. I see no questions, so appreciate you coming out. Apologies for mispronouncing a name earlier. So next is Richard Sheen, followed by John Mearns. So is Richard Sheen is here? Yes, great. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, thank you. So my name is Richard Sheen, I'm the architect behind the proposal. I'd just like to share with you brief insights into how I arrived at my design. The proposal is designed around incorporating and responding to its unique setting at the top of a bluff overlooking Mackay Lake, as well as achieving a balanced harmony with the existing Tudor revival and its context. The addition on Mackay side of the property is not only obvious in the fact that it commands views to and from the lake, but also in the fact that the design ensures preservation of the heritage attributes of the three main facades of the house. The most significant architectural heritage qualities of the Tudor revival style are on what we're calling the front facade or the non-lake facade and the north and south facades. Where significant half timbering, full height leaded glass, ornamental bracketing, and Juliet balconies all contribute in defining the building as a Grade 1 historic site. These three elevations will be preserved and restored where necessary. The architectural style of the proposed addition, is designed to be one of a sublime sophistication found in the modernism of the Japanese and Scandinavian styles. The sophistication of these styles derives from the attention to attaining simplicity within complex relationships of craft and function. The soft and non-aggressive style grows out of the landscape and seeks to mediate between several existing key factors of the property. The existing house sits atop the bluff with a series of terraces descending down to the lake. The massing of the addition integrates itself into the land and subtly moves up the grade to the ground level of the existing house. The treatment of the second floor projection, the bedroom, presents as a modern interpretation of the eyebrow dormers surrounding the house, necessary to allow a ceiling level to reach the exterior wall and open a view to the lake. That's why those are there. The same approach is used in response to the obvious influential adjacent properties, including Hart Massey. Echoing the horizontal line of Hart Massey, as well as the other adjacent properties, the design responds in a grounded way, nestling into the landscape in a horizontal fashion and balancing the dominant steep hip of the existing Tudor revival. The exterior materials will be heat-treated ash, as mentioned before, with a whitewash, mimicking the finish and color of the cedar shakes in the existing roofing. A small terrace on the ground floor will be enclosed by a glass guard, and the guard is set in from the wall on both sides and will be screened with vegetation. The lower level of the addition will be a smooth-faced Indiana limestone to differentiate from the base of the existing house, and window walls, as well as a small band of weathered bronze to separate and distinguish the existing house from the addition. The landscape plays a crucial role in the property's interpretation, with significant terracing at Mackay Lake side that wraps around the north side of the property. Filtered views from along the dog walk accentuate the picturesque setting and help determine view sheds both to and from the property. The intent is to preserve and rehabilitate as much of the terracing as possible, but at the same time paying careful attention to the continuance and replanting of new terracing and landscape to help mitigate any impact. The portion of the property overlooking Old Prospect Road is heavily wooded with mature trees, stabilizing and stepping up the face of the bluff. This fragile ecosystem has of late been left in neglect and will require extensive replanting and repairs to the dry-laid retaining walls. And as part of the proposal, we'll retain and repair all of the existing dry stack walls and introduce new native plantings and significant trees as per the landscape plan where it's appropriate. The landscape outside the garage will be converted from a contemporary hardscape traffic turnaround into a Japanese-influenced garden overlooking Old Prospect Road. That's it.
Thank you very much for that statement. Any questions to Mr. Sheen? I see none, so thank you for coming out this morning. Much appreciated. We're getting down towards the end of the list. I have two names left, John Mearns and Louise Malhotra. We'll proceed in that order.
Mr. Chair, John Mearns had to leave early, wasn't expecting this to go on this long. However, he did distribute an article that he wished everyone would have a look at.
Yes, we received both a written statement from him, and staff are circulating now the comment that he wrote on the speaker series.
Right.
So thank you very much. Then our final speaker this morning is Louise Malhotra. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for listening. My name's Louise Malhotra. I'm actually the current owner of 551 Fairview, along with my husband, Sean. We've spent the last decade raising our 4 children in that beautiful home, and so nobody has more respect for it than we do. We're here because we absolutely support the addition that is proposed at 551 Fairview. We have several reasons for this, but fundamentally, it comes down to this. It breaks no planning laws, and it absolutely respects the very principles of the plan as we've seen set out today. This is an addition, not a demolition, although it's being treated as such. There's no way to consider that this house, the addition on the house, is in fact the public face of the house, as was suggested today. If you in fact look at the original blueprints, which I have a copy of, you can certainly see that it was never intended to be the front of house. The lack of detailing, the flat facade, it all indicates that the attention of the house was to the front of the house and to the very entrance of that house. In fact, the only detail that exists at the back of the house now is because Sean and I put it on the addition in 2010. It was always considered a backyard space. So there has been much that has been mentioned about the pathway that is dividing our home. The public pathway, which since has been labeled the dog walk, which also perhaps is creating a false label of something that's never been called that before. It is a path, a gravel path that people are allowed to walk on. And they do so because they might be walking their dog or otherwise. They're walking along the path to take a look at the views of the lake. Unfortunately, those views are currently obstructed by the 9-foot hedge that's below Fairview, which I would suggest is more of a challenge to the district plan than our proposed addition that we have at 551 Fairview. We feel that the spirit of this addition is in keeping with the plan, and we've heard much to that effect, so I won't continue along that side. We've heard from the architect, we've heard from Fotan. I feel like their points were very valid. What I would like to say is that I feel that the views that are expressed here today are not always the views that are speaking for the entire Rockcliffe community. There has been significant change in the neighborhood over the last few years, and what we voices are not always being heard. There are a few very large, powerful voices that tend to speak up at every hearing. And I feel like it's important for you to note that it doesn't necessarily reflect the changing needs of the community. We need to look at this as a dynamic, thriving neighborhood. We need to understand how to keep it dynamic and keep it thriving. So if we essentially put barriers to new families coming into the neighborhood, that certain houses, such as Fairview, may not change, well, we are creating a vacuum of interest. We are creating essentially a community that one day there will be nobody to protect the Heritage District if nobody wants to move into the neighborhood. Several people have really objected strenuously to this proposal, but I do feel that it's important to note that it hasn't always gone about it in the appropriate means. Both Sean and I, as well as the applicant Daniel, have been subjected to all sorts of highly inappropriate, unofficial forms of criticism, and we feel that the Rockcliffe Heritage Subcommittee has not always stuck to their mandate of providing guideline. We instead feel that it's turned into a little bit of a smear campaign. And that's something that is really a challenge for us. We see that as something that is a challenge moving forward, and we'd really like to see this file show that we can move past this. In fact, we had several people comment publicly on this proposal before there were even any drawings released. How can anyone publicly criticize something they haven't seen yet? This, to me, shows that there's inherent bias happening, and that's something that we feel that is part of the difficulty of this particular file. No one here disputes the value of the Heritage Plan, but we really must be careful to realize that we need to strengthen the neighborhood. We need to take things that are valuable about the houses that are there, but we need to continue to innovate. We need to continue to make it a community that people want to live in. We feel this plan fully respects the Heritage Plan, and it adds architectural innovative value to the neighborhood. We would look forward to this as a change, and as we are neighbors currently now living on Acacia Avenue, as neighbors, we would strongly value and cherish this new addition to 551 Fairview. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? No? Okay, great. I think that expires then the speakers list. So we can move now into the stage of questions to staff or comments from members. I have a number, but I'm happy to wait and let others go first. So, Member Smallwood.
Thank you. We've certainly heard an awful lot today about the importance of the vistas from the closed section of Lansdowne Road. And I'm just wondering of staff if it, when I looked through the various documents, I couldn't find anything anywhere that talked specifically about the views from that closed section of Lansdowne Road up towards the back of the houses, although in one case I think it's actually the front of the house. And I'm just wondering, and I know there is the Mackay Lake Management Plan specifically refers to the views going from the what they call the dog walk down to the lake, and it has a bunch of details, and one of the comments is about the importance of maintaining those vistas onto the lake. And I'm just wondering if it, going forward, would it make sense that there be some specific wording or some, is it even possible that there be some addition to a plan that would talk about the dog walk and the views in both directions? And this is something that's even enforceable in terms of, because I see that over time vegetation grows up, so I'm just wondering, a lot of these views that people are expressing, they have changed. When I was a kid, you could see clearly in both directions. Now, much of the area is overgrown. Is it enforceable, and is there even an interest on behalf of the city to investigate some sort of plan dealing with the vistas from the dog walk going forward? Thank you.
Member Smallwood, to respond to your question, there was no specific policy in the plan about the view from the dog walk, as you mentioned, but in our report, in the staff report, that's why we broke it down into the 3 sections where the views, where the addition would be visible, and one of those was the dog walk. The path is identified as a character-defining element in the plan, so we did take that extra level of assessment. But I might let Sally Coots respond to the sort of going forward question of views and vistas.
Certainly, there are one guideline related to views and vistas, and acknowledging that landscaping might be opened up to restore some of these former views and vistas. But you are correct, Mr. Smallwood, that there are no direct guidelines related to that. But certainly, if there was interest in identifying key views and sheds, et cetera, that could be, accomplished through a report to council and further study. And certainly, during the process of doing the Heritage Conservation District Plan, that was addressed, that there was perhaps a need for deep review analysis that we didn't have time to do during the plan, but that certainly could be looked at in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Other questions, comments? I'm going to go last, so if anyone else wants to speak. Yeah, you go ahead then.
The comment that I have is really my concern with this proposal. Right now, I'm really not planning on supporting the staff recommendation today. And my primary concern, and this is not about objecting to change. Previous speaker mentioned that is a concern that she has. This is about making sure that change is following conservation principles and guidelines, which the community within Rockcliffe Park and even in some cases beyond it have gone to a lot of trouble over the number of years to put together. And I would say that we are talking about a grade 1 building. Hazel Grove may very well have originally designed the primary or principal elevation to be what we think of normally as the front of a house. But in terms of how the lot has evolved over time, that elevation is now a very private elevation. It is not viewed by the public. And in that sense, the addition, which would normally from the front elevation be perceived as subordinate to the grade 1 Tudor Revival style house, which is really an exceptional example, in this case is reversed. It's an odd situation where, in fact, what would normally be viewed from a streetscape by the public is now viewed from the rear. And we've seen and heard from many people today about this, and certainly there's disagreement over the importance of that perspective. From my point of view, I think it is an extremely important perspective, and I really feel that from what I have seen today, the views to the rear elevation of that grade one house are obscured and are certainly not complementary to the intention and the integrity of the design, of which I think it is quite a remarkable one. So at the moment, I just want to say that my intention today is not to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Quinn. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. This file is really a very, very interesting case study, and I have put in as much effort as everybody else to try and understand it. I have very, very carefully examined the architectural plans by Rick Sheen and his client. I have read the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement by John Stewart. I've read the staff report. I've read all of the interventions by the public, particularly Julian Smith's paper, which I have a very high regard for. I've also revisited the site, Tennyson, Rockcliffe, and I've been there quite often, but I specifically went to look at the site. I looked at the stakes in the ground, walked the dog walk, not with a dog, but with the chair of our committee, and walked across to the other side of the lake to look at the view from the conservation area. And I've concluded, having studied the Heritage District Plan, that an addition of some significance, some consequence, could actually fit with the Heritage Conservation Plan on this site in that location. It does not violate the Heritage Conservation Plan principles of a continuous park landscape with villas in the park, because there are villas there and there's sufficient space for that. The green does dominate, so I'm not convinced of the arguments that there should be no there. But I have concluded that the architectural proposal for this addition really does not complement and enhance the heritage attributes of this Tudor Revival building by H.A. Hazelgrove from 1927. It doesn't do that. It's not a matter of taste. I think that very little that seems to show honest respect for the Tudor Revival design, and that's a view which is a personal view of mine. And the issue of this being a contemporary building, really, the word contemporary is so elastic that it's not really something that is very meaningful. Everything is contemporary if it happens right now. I think that the design that is proposed has been called by Julian a kind of Scandinavian, Japanese-influenced modern design. Really, its origins in the Bauhaus, the German Bauhaus movement from the 1920s. And in a way, this design, when you study this design and the early Bauhaus buildings, what you really have here is a Bauhaus revival design. The Bauhaus design were contemporary with the Hazelgrove design, so we have two types of design, a Tudor revival and a Bauhaus revival. And the Bauhaus revival, even though Gropius, who was the head of the Bauhaus, along with Marcel Breuer and Mies van der Rohe, Le Corbusier, and others, Gropius said all art forms should be designed as a unit. In this case, that is lost in this effort. And in particular, and there are certain particular parts that I think should be addressed that we might be able to do some things about. The second floor addition, which is a glass box that obliterates the eave line and obliterates the view to the overhanging roof from the dog walk area, is certainly one that is particularly, I'll say, unseemly. I think that it's something that, if you look at the guidelines, it very, very clearly talks about maintaining the integrity of the roof and the eaves, and this does not do that. A horizontal mullion line in a glass box is, in my view, a token gesture which really doesn't work. Mr. Chair, the other thing I would like to just speak about is the character and materiality of the ground floor and the basement. We have some cedar, or some ash, we have some stone, but really the composition of the materials and the use does not admit that it is connected to a grade 1 heritage building. It's as if it's not there. And I think that there's work that could be done to rethink the composition and the language and the materials of the ground and basement addition to show that it belongs to, but it's not a replica of the existing building. And so, as it stands right now, I could not support the staff recommendation, but there are some suggestions and conditions that I think might help us move along to having an approval of an addition of roughly the size that is being proposed, but really ensure that it does respect and does complement and does enhance the character of this building and the Heritage Conservation District. And I hope that we will be able to talk about that in a moment or two.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. If there are no other comments, maybe I'll take an opportunity to speak. Like the Vice Chair, I've been spending a lot of time on this file. I have the benefit of having the dog walk as part of my 3 times a week, if I'm good, sometimes 2 run. So it forms part of a regular route that I take. And I have to tell you that every single time I've been running along the dog walk since I've known about this application, whatever conversation I'm having gets interrupted because I think deeply about many of the items that members of the public and the applicant and many others have raised. And so the first issue, I want to talk about 3 issues. And the first is the question that I spent a lot of time struggling with as to what the relationship is between the Heritage Conservation District Plan, some of the principles therein, and this notion of what right that plan provides the public with regard to views. And I think Member Smallwood raised some questions with regard to this that I found compelling. And I guess where I'm struggling a little bit with the assertion that the public has a right to something beyond the public realm. So we have the lake on the east side, which is public realm for certain, but on the west side, we have a fairly wide right-of-way, followed by private property and a steep escarpment. Now, interestingly, there are provisions, attributes of the Heritage Conservation District, and I'll read out 2. One is the profusion of trees, hedges, and shrubs, and the second is cedar hedges planted to demarcate property lines to create privacy. And so when I look at those attributes of the plan, I ask myself, would it not be right or fair or consistent with the plan if a property owner chose, consistent with these attributes, to plant trees, hedges, and shrubs, both as part of the soft landscape and also to create some sense of privacy. And my conclusion is that an owner would have that right because the plan allows for it. I don't think that there is a historic right, and it's certainly not articulated in the Heritage Conservation District Plan for a member of the public, me included, to have an unobstructed view of the, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to disagree with Mr. Smith, the rear of a property because the architectural features were not designed to be celebrated on that side of the house. I'm not even certain if it were the front that there would be a right for the public to have an unobstructed view to that. We don't demand that on streetscapes in other parts of Rockcliffe Park. In fact, there are many beautiful grade 1 homes throughout the village that unfortunately one doesn't have much opportunity to see because you have to, maybe trespass a little, encroach, look around the trees, the shrubs, or the hedges to see them. And that is the reality. That's been the evolution. Mr. Smith spoke in his statement about how earlier on Mr. Kiefer actually had insisted on that there was an expectation that there would be screening. And I think that's important to recall. And so the reason I'm speaking about this is because many of the comments members of the public focused on that issue of, how does the plan relate to views from the dog walk? And so I think there's that general concern that I have. And then secondly, when you look at the existing setbacks, I think, the question that I ask myself is, having established that there may not be a right in the plan to have an unobstructed view, what is reasonable in terms of the intrusion into that private property space. And I think, in this case, given that the proposed addition here would still see a setback from the dog walk of 21 meters or 18.5 from the property line, which is approximately equal to the greatest existing setback of any house along the dog walk. The next door property, as staff explained, has a setback of 7.4 meters. So again, where I'm struggling is where the plan sets out that one would be forbidden in the plan from constructing an addition that essentially creates a setback that is approximately equal to the greatest setback that currently exists. So on the first point, I think my conclusion from the discussion today is that on the grounds of some read-in or implied right in the plan, I don't accept that the application can be rejected on those grounds. So that's my first point. My second point is on the question of subordination. And I think this is critical because the plan speaks very, very clearly and has very clear language on the relationship between additions and the existing building. And I read it out earlier, but I'll read it again. All additions to grade 1 buildings shall be complementary to the existing building, subordinate to and distinguishable from the original and compatible in terms of massing, facade, proportion, and roof line. And where I've been struggling with this application a little bit on that front is I think I am in large agreement with Mr. Stewart, who wrote the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement. There is nothing below the second story which violates the plan. I think you can have a different interpretation, subordinate to one may be domineering to another, but I think on balance, the ground level and the first story additions do not, in my view, violate that requirement of subordination. But like Mr. Stewart, I have concerns, and like the Vice, I do have concerns about the second story. We've seen the statement in the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement. There is a concern. There is other language in the plan that speaks very specifically about the need to respect the roof line and elements thereof. And I think it's important to think about how we can ensure that in addition that's before us, it needs to respect the plan in all aspects. And so I do have a concern there, which I will come back to in a moment. And my last comment, which is a more general, gets to, I guess, some of the comments that Mr. Casagrande made, some of which I agreed with, certainly on the professionalism of our heritage staff, absolutely. But he raised some questions about roles and responsibilities that I think, just merit a moment of discussion. I think, there's no question the reason this is difficult, and this file in particular, but heritage always, is because we're between two very clear principles. There is a public right to cultural heritage, which we've recognized through this plan and through the Ontario Heritage Act, and there are existing private property rights. And I mean, the reason why we struggle a lot at this committee is because we're dealing with these two poles, these two tensions. And unfortunately, and I guess I bear some responsibility for this, we do a pretty good job of recognizing the public benefit of cultural heritage values. So on one side, you have a public benefit, but the cost is mostly incurred by private property owners, and that's accepted. I mean, that's what heritage conservation is. Where I think we as a city could do a better job is thinking about how we can translate the benefits of cultural heritage so that they impact private property owners through examining incentives for heritage property owners, and the Mayor's Heritage Task Force is looking next at this issue of how we as a city can incentivize and create a more positive encouragement of property owners to think deeply and to do the right thing in terms of the evolution of their building. So I will admit that I think there is greater work the city can do to help essentially massage the relationship and make sure that heritage is not just seen as a one cost, but can be seen as a benefit, and property owners can be seen to contributing to that. But that leads me to the roles. And I think in this case, it is important to note that we have a number of people who are representing the public interest here. We have the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association, which is made up of people, some of whom are drawn from an elected Rockcliffe Park Residents Association board. Intervening in this, we have set up a rather informal system because the Ontario Heritage Act is frankly a little bit weak on principles of public consultation. Is our system perfect? Probably not, but we do have an opportunity for the community to engage, and I know the staff always ask applicants to go and see the members thereof. We have the city's heritage staff who are also acting in the public interest, and of course, how you characterize the public interest depends on where you sit, and there's no question that there have been questions of interpretation. I raised this at our last meeting, and I know that the staff are going to be advancing some ideas on how shared interpretation, some of the concepts in this plan can be advanced, and I think that's important. And the third actors acting in the public interest is this committee and planning and council. And the great part about this, with the exception of our public members, is we are accountable to our publics, and that's important as well. And so the decisions we make, we ultimately recognize we are making on behalf of residents in the public interest. So while I agree that there are disagreements among those three, I would argue that that's a healthy disagreement. I don't think we should these types of processes to be free of conflict. There's going to be iteration, there are going to be disagreements, and I think that can lead to better outcomes. And where this is leading me is prior to this meeting, the Vice Chair and I spoke a little bit and talked about some of the issues both he and I have raised. And I think what I would like to ask the Vice Chair to do is to speak to a way that he and I have found that we think could be a way forward on this file, if the committee agrees, to essentially approve this file in a way that takes into account the concerns that I raised about subordination, the concerns that the Vice Chair raised about compatibility. And again, it would be my hope, if the committee agrees, that this suggestion, this motion, which would amend the staff recommendation, would lead to a better outcome after an iterative process from which we've heard from community members, the staff, the applicant, and members of this committee. So with that introduction, I'll ask the Vice Chair to introduce the motion.
Thank you. I think that having heard the public today and having heard the architect and the planners for the applicant, I think that the expectations that everyone has is that they would really like to either have it, the proposal rejected or approved as is. I think that there is room for some redesign that should go a long way to satisfy the concerns for making sure that this proposed addition is really compatible with the Heritage District guidelines, and in particular the existing Hazel Grove building. And I drafted a motion which really tries to send the architect and owner back to do some redesign in consultation with the heritage staff, to come up with some revisions that would achieve, I think, both an addition that can be realized, but one which is compatible and at least sympathetic to the existing building, if not enhancing it. And it's something that I'd just like to read for the review of my colleagues here. There's a couple of whereases, just to set the framework. Whereas there are concerns about the compatibility of the proposed addition with the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District plan, and whereas the unique nature of this property has led to the rear of the building being considered part of the public streetscape, therefore be it resolved that the Built Heritage Subcommittee directs staff to work with the applicant for the following. 1, to revise the plans for the second-story addition to improve the conservation of and reflect the heritage character of the upper story and roof line, including the dormers, of the Mackay Lake elevation of the existing home. And to revise the plans so that the interventions to the second story are minimized and designed to complement the existing building's heritage attributes. And to revise elements of the exterior cladding of the ground floor and basement of the addition to respect and complement the existing building's heritage attributes. And finally, and this addresses the public view from the dog walk, to revise the landscape plan and site plan to introduce additional plantings, such as hedges along the dog walk, to screen the view of the property from public view. And be it further resolved that these revisions be presented at the November 28th Planning Committee meeting. So in order to try to be helpful to find a way forward on this one, I'm humbly submitting these.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. Question from Councillor Moffat.
Question on the fourth point here. Honestly, I don't understand it. If you do the fourth, let's say you did the fourth point first and you just planted hedges all up along the path, who cares what you do at the back of the property? No one can see it. So why do number 4? Why create a dark alley of a pathway by encouraging more plantings on either side of the pathway the entire way through? Otherwise, then it's just a pathway with no view of anything ever. I just don't get the point of that one.
Mr. Chair, do you want me to respond? Sure. I think that having walked the pathway, it's generally open, and to ensure that some key viewpoints towards the addition are screened by some hedges. I don't see this as a dark and dangerous pathway there. It's really still be quite beautiful, and it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how that comes back to Planning Committee on that point. The other 3 I'm fine with. This one I'm confused by. Thanks.
Councillor Wilkinson.
I am the same point. I agree. I don't think we should be telling people what they should plant. The way you put it this way, to revise it to include it, means they have to put it in, because once on the plan, they've got to build it. If the owner doesn't want to put a hedge in there, I don't think we should make them. I just think that should be taken off. It could be done as it's a suggestion that they could, but to put it down as to revise the plan to show it, that's the direction they have to do it, and I don't think that's a good idea at all. I just think we don't need number 4. The other 3 are very reasonable to put in there. If you want to have the to review the site plan if they want to, but I think it's up to them whether they want to put a hedge in or not. It's not up to us to tell people to put in hedges.
Mr. Vice Chair, would you be open to either a softening of the language of paragraph 4 to indicate their flexibility in those discussions on the landscape plan?
My fellow members of the committee, my understanding from the owner and the owner's architect is that that's the easiest one that they'd be happy to do.
So I am going to propose an amendment to the Vice Chair's motion, and it would read as follows: to revise the landscape plan and site plan to explore the introduction of. And that way, I don't feel strongly about it. Mr. Vice Chair, would you like to, would you accept the removal of the 4th paragraph?
I think that I would accept the removal of it. I think that what we may find is that the owners will be, and the architect may be very willing to do that anyway.
Okay, so what I'm going to put forward first is I'd like the committee's view on the Vice Chair's draft motion with the removal of paragraph 4. So is that carried with the removal of paragraph 4? Yes. It's carried. So then going to the main motion with the understanding of the Vice Chair's motion having been passed, can we carry the main motion as amended? Is that carried? Carried. Okay, great. So thank you very much. That's carried 7-0 with the amended motion, and we can provide copies of the amended motion to members of public if they are interested. So I'd like to conclude this item by warmly thanking everybody who came out today. I know it was a long morning. It's a good chunk of your day, but I think it's an excellent sign of the healthy levels of interest and civic engagement in a neighborhood that no matter what side of this application you were on, it's clear that there's a lot of care and a lot of interest in ensuring the future viability and livability of Rockcliffe Park. So thank you to everybody for coming out this morning. Much appreciated. I think we can whip quickly through the agenda. Any notices of motion? Any inquiries? No other business? We are adjourned, and we'll see you on Friday, the 1st of December. Thank you. Yeah, I will. Has Laura read them?